One night, Kana was conducting an investigation while hiding as if she were spying on something. Matsuri and her friends ran past the area. Not long after, Kana noticed a suspicious transaction involving members of the General Affairs Department and the Security Department, so she quickly took photos as evidence. When the transaction ended and both parties left, Kana immediately climbed down and began walking home. Unexpectedly, someone in a nearby car had noticed her. While Kana was checking the photos she had just taken, she realized that the Security Department and the General Affairs Department were secretly working together. A black car drove toward her, and Kana thought to herself how cheap the price of justice could be. She was convinced that if the photos were made public, one of the organizations would be exposed. The black car suddenly struck her, and the girl driving the car took the memory card from Kana's camera before fleeing the scene and leaving Kana behind. The next morning, the alarm in Chisado's room rang loudly. Chisado quickly got up and opened her curtains to greet the new day. She changed her clothes and prepared to leave for school, while Yuki was still sound asleep in his room. Chisado walked to Yuki's room and found him still fast asleep. She lay on top of him playfully, which startled him, and tried to wake him up since it was already late, but he refused to get up. Chisado kept shaking his shoulders, wondering why he would not wake up even though his cheerful childhood friend was already trying to rouse him. Because Yuki continued to ignore her, Chisado hugged him and rolled him off the bed onto the floor. She sat on top of him and teased him by asking if he liked being woken up that way. Chisado reminded him to hurry and get ready so they would not miss the morning train. Suddenly, Chisado noticed something on Yuki that startled her, causing her to scream in surprise and slap him out of reflex. Later that morning, Chisado and Yuki walked to school together and met Mifuyu on the way. Mifuyu believed that Chisado and Yuki were truly close since they were always together. Yuki jokingly asked if Mifuyu could still say that after seeing the red mark on his cheek. Mifuyu commented that the slap must have hurt and wondered what Chisado had done to him. Chisado admitted that she slapped him because he showed her something strange, but Yuki claimed it was just an accident. Mifuyu gently touched Yuki's cheek and told him she hoped the pain would fade soon. Yuki was so touched that he hugged Mifuyu and said she was always so kind, unlike Chisado. Playing along with the moment, Yuki dramatically declared that he loved Mifuyu and asked if she would be his girlfriend. Mifuyu thanked him warmly but said she had already fallen in love with someone else. Yuki was shocked to hear this, and Chisado commented that Yuki should have realized his feelings sooner, that it was already too late. Mifuyu encouraged Yuki to stay strong, believing he would find true love someday. Their playful scene ended up drawing attention from people passing by. Yuki, Chisado, and Mifuyu were all high school students. Mifuyu remarked that it had been a long time since they acted out a little play like that, but Yuki thought such antics were not appropriate for public places. When they arrived at their club room, Yuki noticed Mikuru bending down as if she were looking for something. He greeted her and asked if she had lost anything. Mikuru said she was just doing her usual routine. Before long, Chisado lightly tapped Yuki on the head for grinning in a way she found suspicious, suspecting he was having silly thoughts. Mifuyu then asked what Mikuru was doing. Mikuru stood up and simply said the word pink. Hearing that, Yuki jokingly asked if Chisado was wearing something pink, but Chisado quickly denied it and said her clothes were actually light blue. Just then, Nozomi arrived and greeted everyone, asking if Yuki had been scolded again. Yuki explained that it was all just a misunderstanding. Ei came in and teased Yuki for never studying as usual, followed by Ki, who called him silly in her usual way. Yuki insisted he had done nothing wrong, but Ei and he ignored his protests and began pulling various snacks from the shelves. While Nozomi opened another shelf, she was surprised when a pile of candy spilled out. She realized she had forgotten to turn off her candy-making robot, which she had named Amataku Mig-3. Ari and Ki tried to help clean up, but ended up slipping instead. A little while later, Oboro entered the room and was amazed by the sheer amount of treats scattered around. After they finished tidying up, Oboro showed everyone a new line of snack products made by the Umechin company. Ki expressed her envy that Oboro always received so many snacks from her family's company. Ei teased Yuki by saying he could eat as many snacks as he wanted if he married Oboro. Yuki was puzzled by how the conversation suddenly turned into talk of marriage. Oboro sat next to Yuki and asked what he thought about her suggestion. Yuki, still confused, wondered what Oboro was even talking about. Oboro clarified that they were really just discussing the chance to taste as many of the new snack sticks as they wanted. Chisado then suggested everyone try the new flavor of the snack sticks together. Oboro asked everyone to taste the snack he made. Ari and he immediately tried it and agreed that it was delicious. Oboro smiled and took note of their reactions, then asked Michiru for her opinion, but she simply said it tasted ordinary. When it was Yuki's turn to try it, Oboro seemed curious about how Yuki would eat the snack stick. To his surprise, Yuki broke the stick in half, which made Oboro wince in discomfort. Oboro could not understand why Yuki did that. Suddenly, Chisado took a small piece from Yuki's leftovers and tossed it into the air, intending to catch it with her mouth. Before she could eat it, Yuki quickly caught it first to stop her. Mifuyu explained that the snack was made of white chocolate, and Oboro apologized for forgetting to mention it to Chisado. It turned out that Chisato could not eat chocolate. Nozomi felt sorry for her, especially since Chisato was part of the food research club but could not enjoy chocolate at all. Eri and Ki wondered why Chisato could not just find a way to deal with her chocolate problem. Chisato thanked Yuki for stopping her earlier. All of a sudden, Hazuki, their teacher, rushed in and said the situation was urgent. Yuki was confused by her sudden entrance, but Hazuki simply grabbed a large glass of beer and drank it, claiming that she would not get drunk that easily. Hazuki then informed them that their club might be disbanded, shocking Yuki and the others. Later that day, a student council meeting was held. Mohaiji, the head of the General Affairs Department, spoke about a recent assault incident. According to the information he had gathered, the problem was connected to harassment of certain students, something even the student council president could not easily resolve. Mohaiji demanded that Yakumo, the student council president, step down and take responsibility, since he was the one who had appointed Yuki as the head of the General Affairs Department. Other council members agreed, but suddenly Satsuki arrived and voiced her objection. She apologized for being late because she had something important to investigate first. Mohaiji was clearly annoyed by her arrival. Satsuki, who served as the head of the finance department, then asked Mohaiji as the head of general affairs if he knew who would take over as student council president in case of an emergency. Mohaiji replied that of course the vice president would take over until the next election. Satsuki followed up by asking whether Mohaiji thought the vice president already had enough experience to handle preparations for the upcoming election, and whether the president should really resign without ensuring a proper election process. Mohaiji countered by bringing up issues of excessive spending in the security department, which was overseen by the president. Satsuki responded by presenting financial records from the General Affairs Department. She explained that she had received the records from an underclassman in General Affairs, and after reviewing them, she discovered several expenses that did not match the reported amounts. Embarrassed, Mohaiji quickly tried to cover the records and insisted that his department had no intention of committing any wrongdoing. Satsuki then suggested that they move on to discussing the incident that had occurred earlier that morning, and Mohaiji reluctantly agreed, preferring to change the topic. Throughout the exchange, Yakumo remained silent and did not defend himself. Rumors about the possible disbandment of many clubs quickly spread throughout the school. Satsuki's plan as the finance department head was to reduce the number of unnecessary clubs, cut funding for clubs with no achievements, and even disband some of them entirely. Reiji, a member of the Action Figure Club, said this was a serious problem for them. Their club required silicone rubber to create models, and they also needed materials to build displays for the cultural festival, which was held twice a year. The Action Figure Club made their products and stored them in a garage, which was why Reiji often earned the nickname Garage. Yuki was curious about a supposed propeller on Reiji's head, but Reiji denied having anything like that. Miyaru explained that the Action Figure Club needed a lot of extra tools and equipment, which were very expensive. Mifu added that the ingredients needed for their own food research club were also costly, meaning they spent quite a lot of money too. Yuki began to realize that since their club had no notable achievements, they would not have much of a case to argue against Satsuki's plan to cut clubs. While they were in the clubroom, Nozomi expressed her frustration, saying she did not want the food research club to be disbanded. Mifuyo reminded her that the plan was not final yet, even if Satsuki became the next president. However, Ei and Ki believed that Satsuki had a strong chance of winning because she was popular, attractive, and very capable. Chisato agreed that nothing had been decided yet, but Hazuki boldly predicted that Satsuki would definitely enforce her plan if she became president because she was a very serious person. Momoro was surprised and asked if Hazuki knew Satsuki well. Hazuki then revealed that Satsuki was actually her younger sister. Uli and Ki were shocked to hear this, especially since Satsuki and Hazuki did not look alike at all. Satsuki was stylish and seemingly perfect, while Hazuki had a different vibe. Chisato asked Hazuki to talk to Satsuki, but Hazuki admitted it was impossible because Satsuki was too stubborn. Uli was unsure what they should do, and Ki suggested supporting a different candidate. In the end, only 3 departments qualified for the first campaign round. The security department had no candidate because their leader was disqualified, which meant they would not participate in the next election. As a result, Satsuki's only opponent would come from the General Affairs Department. Yuki and his friends spotted Mohaiji from the General Affairs Department campaigning nearby. Yuki felt that it might be too much to vote for Mohaiji, who looked as if he was wearing a mask. However, Chisato pointed out that Mohaiji was not wearing a mask at all. He simply was not very handsome. Yuki started to wonder if he was the only one seeing Mohaiji as if he had a mask on, just like how he thought he saw a propeller on Reiji's head the other day. He began to suspect that maybe he was imagining things. Suddenly, Mohaiji approached Yuki and introduced himself. He politely asked Yuki and the others to vote for him as the next student council president and handed them a prepaid cafeteria card. Chisato questioned whether this meant Mohaiji was trying to bribe them. Mohaiji quickly denied it and explained that it was only a small token of appreciation. Before long, other students nearby started calling out to Mohaiji and asked for the same card, and he happily handed more of them out. Shiseto realized that what Mohaiji was doing went against the rules, but Yuki pointed out that it technically wasn't a violation since the official campaign period had not started yet. All of a sudden, a girl came running and couldn't stop in time. She accidentally bumped into Yuki, causing him to fall. Yuki was startled when he realized how close she was as she quickly apologized and asked if he was hurt. Yuki also asked if she was okay. After the girl left, Shiseto noticed the small smile on Yuki's face. It turned out that the girl was likely a scholarship student since she boarded the special bus provided for scholarship recipients. Shiseto guessed that she might also have a part-time job, which could explain why she was in such a hurry. Yuki then noticed a key on the ground, which he assumed might belong to the girl. Later in the club room, Shiseto and the others refused to support Mohaiji because of his questionable tactics. They had all sensed trouble since they did not have a strong candidate of their own to back. Hazuki suggested that one of them should consider running for student council president, but Yuki was unsure if any of them could actually win. Hazuki pointed out that they could either stay silent and do nothing or take a chance, even if the odds were slim. If there were no other options, trying would not hurt. Shiseto agreed because she did not want to just sit around and watch their food research club get disbanded. She even felt excited about the idea of standing up to the finance department. Everyone else shared her determination because they all wanted to protect the club. Mikuru said she would support the plan if Yuki was willing to take the lead. Yuki agreed and encouraged his friends to fight alongside him. The group joined hands in solidarity. After that, Yuki asked which of them would actually run for president, but to his surprise, everyone pointed at him. Meanwhile, Yakumo visited Kana in the hospital. He informed her that the election was about to begin and asked what he should do next. At that moment, Kimika lay quietly, unable to move her body. Yuki wondered why his friends had chosen him to run for student council president. They supported him because he was always willing to help, while Ki reminded him not to back out. Nozomi was ready to support him in any way she could, and Oboro promised to always be there for him. Mifuyu also believed that Yuki was the right person for the job. Yuki admitted that he did not feel qualified to become president, but no one agreed with his doubts. Hazuki pointed out that Yuki was popular because everyone trusted him, yet Yuki felt that people were simply pushing responsibilities onto him. As the head of the food research club, Shiseto insisted that Yuki should run in the election in order to protect their club. Yuki remembered a moment from childhood when he and Shiseto once delivered flowers to a bride at a wedding. Shiseto had playfully asked the bride to attend her own future wedding with Yuki. The bride smiled and said that it seemed like Yuki and Shiseto might already be in love. At that time, neither of them understood what love really meant, and the bride told them they would understand once they grew older. Even now, Yuki still felt uncertain about love, believing it was something he could not quite reach. Shiseto encouraged him to keep trying, telling him that love was closer than he thought. Yuki then woke from a nap to find Shiseto unexpectedly in his room. Still half asleep, he accidentally brushed against her shoulder when he reached out his hand. Startled and embarrassed, he quickly asked why she was there. Shiseto teasingly mentioned that people sometimes talk in their sleep and revealed that Yuki had murmured her name. Flustered, Yuki denied it and tried to change the subject, insisting that he wanted to find the person truly meant for him. Shiseto was confused by his words, while Yuki explained that dreams sometimes felt easier than reality. Shiseto reminded him that they had a Sunday club meeting to discuss the upcoming election, but Yuki refused to attend and even said he might quit the club to avoid becoming a candidate. Meanwhile, Mifuyu and the others reviewed a financial report from the school's accounting department and discovered that the Food Research Club was at the top of the list of clubs scheduled to be disbanded. Ki pointed out that Yuki was the only one who could save the club by becoming student council president and overturning the decision. Shiseto informed them that Yuki had already refused and was thinking about leaving the club. While walking alone to school, Yuki wondered why everyone kept forcing responsibilities onto him. As he was lost in thought, Matsuri came running and accidentally bumped into him before quickly continuing on her way. Soon after, Ayumu passed by and greeted him, followed by Mao, who also offered a cheerful hello. Yuki realized that he had just encountered several girls from Matsuri's group. Moments later, a bicycle came speeding toward him and collided with him. Yuki winced in pain and instinctively apologized, only to be surprised when he recognized the cyclist as Satsuki. He quickly helped straighten her bicycle. Satsuki assured him that he did not need to apologize, admitting that she was also at fault for riding too fast to brake in time. She learned Yuki's name after noticing a dropped name card. Remembering that he needed to return a key to the academy, Yuki became nervous and repeatedly apologized. Satsuki smiled and gently told him that saying sorry too often could make the word lose its meaning. Yuki understood and gave one final sincere apology, which made both of them smile. Before parting, Yuki carefully corrected her on the proper way to pronounce his name, and Satsuki responded with a warm smile, calling him amusing. Elsewhere, Oboro asked Chisato why Yuki wanted to quit the club and why Chisato had not convinced him to stay. Oboro then decided to try persuading Yuki directly and called him. However, instead of a serious conversation, Oboro jokingly teased Yuki with exaggerated claims about their friendship. Yuki chose not to respond to the playful remarks and quickly ended the call. Oboro admitted to herself that she had failed to change his mind. At that time, Yuki passed by the lost and found room and noticed a girl he had met the day before stepping out. He greeted her and returned the key he had picked up earlier. She was delighted and asked where he had found it. Yuki explained that he had discovered it at the spot where they had accidentally bumped into each other. Grateful, the girl revealed that it was the key to her house and expressed relief that he had returned it so quickly. Yuki felt glad as well, realizing it was worth the effort to bring the key back in person. She was surprised that Yuki had come to school on a Sunday, and Yuki mentioned that he had planned to attend a club meeting. When she asked which club he belonged to, he explained that he was in the Food Research Club, which mostly focused on tasting snacks. The girl thought it sounded fun. Yuki asked if she was also attending a club meeting, but she gently explained that scholarship students were not allowed to join clubs at their school. She added that she needed to leave soon to work at a factory. Before leaving, she introduced herself as Isara, a first-year student. Meanwhile, Nozomi was in tears because she could not accept Yuki leaving the club, even saying that she might feel like dying without him. Their friends were shocked to hear such an emotional outburst. Nozomi kept a photo as her phone wallpaper, but it turned out to be just a picture of herself with an Ujima roll. She felt heartbroken, realizing that she might never get to taste Yuki's handmade Ujima rolls again. At that time, Yuki was walking alone, wondering why he kept bumping into so many pretty girls that day and joking to himself that maybe his luck was on the rise. Suddenly, he collided with someone again. Thinking it was yet another chance encounter with a girl, he was surprised to find two male students stopping him instead. They asked if he was from the General Affairs Department or the Finance Department. One of them grabbed Yuki's name card and discovered that he was actually a member of the Food Research Club. Not long after, their leader arrived and ordered them to release Yuki. They turned out to be from the security department. Their leader, Takumo, told them to let Yuki go and remarked that it was unlikely anyone would try to catch him with only a short time left in his current role. The two students apologized for their rough behavior and helped Yuki back to his feet. Yuki understood that they were only concerned about the possibility of violence during the election season. Takumo then asked if Yuki was running for student council president. Yuki explained that he wasn't running by choice and was only being pushed by his friends. Takumo guessed that this was probably an attempt to save the Food Research Club from being shut down. Curious, Yuki asked how Yakumo knew about that. Takumo revealed that he had read Satsuki's financial report, which included the Food Research Club on the list of clubs to be dissolved. Takumo asked if Yuki still refused to run. Yuki admitted that he felt pessimistic, believing someone like him had no chance of winning. Takumo reminded him that if he gave up, the club would definitely be disbanded. He suggested that Yuki either support a candidate he trusted or run as an independent. Since the security department was staying neutral that year and not endorsing anyone, there would only be two main candidates, which created a good opening for Yuki. Takumo even offered his support. Meanwhile, Chisato was stunned that Yuki had disobeyed the club president's instructions. Mifyu believed the best solution was to reconcile with Yuki and bring him back. Just then, Michiru appeared and grabbed a chocolate-flavored snack that Chisato had thrown away. Michiru asked if Chisato disliked chocolate. Chisato replied that Michiru could have it because she wasn't really in the mood for chocolate herself. Michiru casually said the word blue, which made Chisato think she liked blueberries. He felt that they needed to find another plan. Ki suggested working hard to earn achievements, so the club wouldn't be easy to shut down, but Oboro pointed out that earning achievements wasn't so simple. Suddenly, Nozomi proudly showed off a new mixer with a Hyper Tornado design equipped with an extra-long spin and a reverse rotation prevention system. It was, as she called it, the 6th-generation Nero machine. Omura was doubtful that this could count as an official achievement. Nozomi confidently declared that she had perfected it to have zero roughness and believed that Satsuki would hesitate to disband their club after seeing it. Nozomi eagerly tested the machine, barely able to contain her excitement about the results. Later, while buying a drink from a vending machine, Yuki noticed Satsuki struggling with something and went over to help. Once again, Satsuki mispronounced Yuki's name and even added Pico, teasing that he always bowed so often it reminded her of the sound. Her bicycle chain had come off and she was frustrated because she had a busy day ahead. Yuki offered to fix it, and after a bit of effort, the chain was back in place. Satsuki handed him a handkerchief since his hands were now dirty and thanked him for his help. As they walked together down the corridor, Yuki shared that he had been asked to run for student council president. To his surprise, Satsuki said that it was worth trying. Yuki then asked why she planned to disband the Food Research Club. Satsuki explained that the club's activities felt more like a group of close friends hanging out in the cafeteria drinking tea, which she believed did not meet the proper standards for an official school club. Yuki admitted that her reasoning wasn't wrong. Satsuki was surprised that he agreed so calmly. Yuki explained that he and the other members loved their club and wanted to keep it alive, which was why they would rather fight in the election than just sit and watch it fade away. He confessed that his decision to run was reckless and that he knew he had little chance of winning. Satsuki then asked if he knew the term used for racehorses that win competitions. Yuki answered, the strongest horses, but that wasn't what she meant. Satsuki explained that winning horses are simply the ones that actually compete. Horses that never race will never have a chance to win, and the same applied to elections. She added that she enjoyed watching people give their all, even when they knew the odds were against them. Yuki was deeply moved by her words. Satsuki hurried off to take care of her other errands, and Yuki felt truly grateful that she had listened to his worries despite her busy schedule. Yuki went to the food research club and was shocked to see how messy the club room had become. His friends were relieved and happy to see him back. Curious about the situation, Yuki asked what had actually happened. Chisato explained that everyone had been feeling restless and uneasy because Yuki hadn't been around. After that, they all worked together to clean up the room. Yuki admitted that he had been thinking about something important. He had decided to fight for the Food Research Club's survival. Since he wanted to run as a candidate for the Student Council president, he was determined to seriously aim for victory. He also didn't want his friends to push this heavy responsibility onto him without truly believing in it. Because of that, Yuki suggested holding an internal club vote so everyone could freely choose the person they believed had the best chance of winning the election. Hazuki agreed that this was the best way to decide, and everyone else supported the idea. Chisato quickly handed out pieces of paper so each member could write down their choice. Before the vote began, Yuki wanted to say a few words. He admitted that the Food Research Club had been a little too relaxed lately, spending most of their time eating snacks bought with club funds and gossiping. To outsiders, it probably looked like the club was useless and unproductive, and that might be why the school considered shutting it down. Yuki said that despite what others might think, the club was precious to him. Thanks to the club, he had met all of them, shared fun times, and created memories filled with laughter. He didn't want to lose something so meaningful. He asked everyone to think carefully and choose the person who had the best chance to win, someone they truly wanted to support. Yuki also reminded them that leadership required courage, decisiveness, and a strong presence. He hoped they would pick someone capable of securing victory. When the voting ended, the results showed that Chisato received 1 vote while Yuki won by a landslide. Everyone cheered in excitement. Yuki was completely confused and wondered if they hadn't heard his speech, since he had secretly hoped they would choose Chisato instead. However, his heartfelt words had inspired the others and convinced them that Yuki would fight the hardest to protect the club. Realizing this, Yuki felt as though he had unknowingly set himself up. Chisato gently told him to accept the fair result with humility. Later, Yuki walked home with her. Along the way, Chisato mentioned that Yuki should simply follow through with what he had said earlier. When they passed a small shop, Chisato stopped to buy some chocolate from a stand near the sidewalk. After arriving home, she cut the chocolate in half and offered 1 piece to Yuki. Chisato looked delighted when Yuki happily enjoyed the treat. That day, Chisato announced that their club room would serve as the campaign headquarters, and she volunteered to be a campaign chair. Everyone was excited to take on this new mission and started discussing what they wanted to do for the election campaign. Hazuki, being a teacher, could not directly help them, but at least she could give advice. Yuki had already submitted his registration form, which meant they were officially entering a campaign stage. Chisato and the others were full of energy, but they were unsure what to do first. Hazuki explained that as part of the Student Council president election, the school would hold a preliminary round before the official voting. Anyone who failed to pass the preliminary round would not be able to run in the final election. It was essentially a stage where minority candidates would be eliminated. Since Yuki was considered a minority candidate, he asked everyone to think of ways to prevent that from happening. Hazuki told them that Yuki needed at least 10% of the votes to pass the preliminary round, which meant they needed around 600 votes just to qualify. Yuki wondered how they could possibly gather 600 votes. Chisato thought maybe they could present a solid financial report. Oboro suggested they might need to win people's sympathy. Some members brought up ideas like increasing club budgets, doubling the Food Research Club's funding, offering snack allowances, and even joking about things like alcohol. Oboro argued that giving out allowances could lead to misuse of funds, so he proposed offering free snacks instead. Unfortunately, Yuki pointed out that those were just sweet campaign promises, and he wouldn't win with a financial report like that. The bigger issue was that none of them had real knowledge or experience in running a campaign. Suddenly, Yakumo entered the clubroom and Nozomi was overjoyed to see him. Nozomi and Yakumo had not met in a long time, as Yakumo used to be her classmate back in their first year. Shiseto was surprised to learn that Yuki also knew Yakumo. It turned out Yakumo had come to the Food Research Club to discuss Yuki's candidacy. He asked if they would be willing to accept help from the security department for Yuki's campaign. Everyone was shocked by the unexpected offer. Yuki asked why Yakumo had chosen him in particular. Before Yakumo could answer, Oboro jokingly claimed that if Yakumo had come to claim Yuki's body, he was too late because Yuki already belonged to him from head to toe. Yuki quickly told Oboro to stop making such jokes. Hazuki suspected that Yakumo was looking for something in return, and Yakumo admitted it. The security department didn't want to lose their standing to either the finance department or the general affairs department. Nozomi wondered why they couldn't just wait and run next year. Yakumo explained that an election is usually won by the party already in power, and once authority is handed over, it's extremely difficult to regain it. Shiseto began to understand that if Yuki managed to win this election, all three departments would be on equal footing next year. Yuki asked again why Yakumo had chosen him when there were other candidates. Yakumo revealed that Yuki actually had a good chance of making it through the preliminary round. Yakumo explained that Satsuki's recent financial report had been leaked, and his research showed that the finance department's support had dropped by 10%. The decline was due to Satsuki putting too much pressure on financial aid reforms, but the main reason was the controversial plan to reform the school clubs. Many clubs were about to face budget cuts, and they were already opposing the reforms. If Yuki's team openly showed that they opposed the club reforms, they could gain the support of those clubs. The Food Research Club itself was on the list of clubs scheduled to be dissolved, which meant that a candidate who spoke out against the reforms would quickly gain backing. Oboro pointed out that if the General Affairs Department acted first, they would be the ones to collect those votes. Yakumo responded that the General Affairs Department planned to launch the real campaign only after the preliminary round and would later release a financial report to attack Satsuki's weaker positions. Hazuki asked how the votes would look in numbers. Yakumo estimated that by combining the votes of clubs opposing the reforms with the support of the security department, they could secure around 400 votes. The remaining 200 would still need to be gathered elsewhere. Oboro felt confident they could manage that if they reached out to friends for help. Nozomi, who knew a lot of people, promised she could bring in many votes, while Shiseto and Mifyu were sure they could handle the task as well. The key was that they could realistically reach 400 votes if they worked with the security department. Yuki realized that they couldn't handle everything on their own. Shiseto asked about the kind of partnership Yakumo was offering, especially since the security department was currently under operational review. Yakumo explained that he couldn't lend them any members but could share his knowledge and expertise. Yuki looked very interested in the proposal. Shiseto reminded everyone that both sides would benefit from the arrangement, so there was no need for exaggerated promises. Yuki cautioned Shiseto not to act overly proud towards someone offering help, but Shiseto pointed out that Yakumo was not doing this out of pure goodwill. It was possible that Yakumo wanted to create a puppet administration under Yuki. Yakumo acknowledged that it was natural for them to be cautious and offered a cooperation contract valid only until the preliminary round ended. If they grew to trust him, they could then extend the agreement. In the end, they all agreed to work together, and Yakumo promised not to let Yuki and the others down. Yakumo shook hands with every member of the Food Research Club as a sign that their cooperation was officially beginning. "You look forward to working together." Hazuki reminded him not to involve her students in any conflicts and asked Yakumo to look after them, since they were all good kids. Yakumo explained that the financial report strategy should be used as the final move because no one would pay attention to the report of a weak candidate. What they needed first was at least 600 votes to pass the preliminary round, and to achieve that, they had to present a standout policy protecting the school clubs. As the first step, Yakumo asked Yuki to visit the clubs that were on the disbandment list and request their support. Yuki immediately agreed, but Yakumo suggested he bring along a female member since some clubs had many male members, and it would help to have a girl smiling and making the request. Yuki's plan was solid because he was naturally skilled in campaigning. Yuki then asked who among them would join him, but everyone hesitated because there were 100 clubs to visit. In the end, Shiseto volunteered, pointing out that as the campaign leader, she should take on the job when no one else would. After that, Yakumo assigned someone to collect signatures, explaining that people who signed a petition were less likely to betray them and would probably vote for their side. Aoi and Ki complained that the task sounded boring, which irritated Yuki, who wondered if they even intended to help at all. Yakumo then mentioned that the job was more fitting for pretty girls. Hearing that, Aoi and Ki perked up and became eager to start. Yuki commented that Yakumo truly was a professional, able to get people to do exactly what he wanted. Yuki and Shiseto first approached Reiji and Miyaru from the Figure Action Club, inviting them to join an election alliance that supported Yuki. The alliance would consist of clubs targeted for disbandment by Satsuki, aiming to fight back against the groups backing the finance and general affairs departments. Chisato persuaded them further by appointing Reiji and Miyaru as the alliance's president and vice president. Yuki asked them to visit each club and help organize the alliance. Chisato explained that they wanted the organization to form voluntarily so it wouldn't look like a forced coalition. Both Yuki and Chisato earnestly pleaded for their help. Miyaru pulled Reiji aside to discuss it, and eventually Miyaru agreed to their request, but only under one condition. Meanwhile, A and Ki carried out their task with surprising success, attracting crowds of male students eager to sign their petition. Nozomi handled putting up posters using her technical skills. Mifuyu worked on preparing the speech with Yakumo's help, while Mikuru focused on printing campaign posters. That afternoon, Satsuki came to meet Hazuki. Hazuki praised Satsuki for having the courage to come alone. Satsuki replied that she didn't have time to entertain Hazuki's nonsense. When Satsuki asked what Hazuki wanted, Hazuki casually asked if it was possible to receive an advance bonus. Satsuki said that wasn't her responsibility and suggested Hazuki speak with the General Affairs Department instead. Hazuki then asked Satsuki not to be so cold, reminding her that Hazuki was still her older sister, even if they had different mothers. Hazuki wondered if Satsuki intended to disband the Food Research Club just to upset her. Satsuki denied it, explaining that she would never let her personal life influence her school duties. The decision was made only after a thorough review. Hazuki felt relieved to hear that, admitting she wouldn't know what to do if the club members faced trouble because of her. Satsuki then asked if that was all Hazuki wanted to discuss, as she had a meeting with the election committee. Hazuki commented that Satsuki had grown up and was sure their mother would be proud of her. Satsuki responded that such praise wasn't enough because she needed to surpass Hazuki by achieving what Hazuki never could, becoming student council president. Hazuki was taken aback and questioned why Satsuki seemed to resent her so much, even wondering why Satsuki didn't just fire her, since teachers at the school were technically hired under student authority. Satsuki firmly repeated that she would never allow her personal feelings to interfere with her responsibilities. Hazuki replied that this meant Satsuki wouldn't mind dismissing her if it were a professional decision. Hazuki then told Satsuki to do as she wished and wished her good luck in the election. Hazuki assured her that as a teacher, she would continue to support Satsuki without letting their family ties affect her judgment. Yuki felt exhausted and dropped himself onto a park bench, surprised by how draining it was to talk with so many people. Chisato smiled at him and teasingly called him lazy. Without warning, she placed a coin on Yuki's face and told him to go buy her a coffee. Yuki was caught off guard that Chisato would order him around like that. To her, Yuki was someone special, someone she could rely on, and she expected him to listen. Yuki joked that if that was the case, Chisato should treat him like someone valuable. Chisato smiled and said that he really was valuable to her. While Yuki was buying drinks, Satsuki suddenly approached him. She mentioned that she had heard he was officially running as a candidate and declared that the two of them were now rivals. Once again, Satsuki accidentally mispronounced Yuki's name, but he simply smiled and didn't correct her. Satsuki shook his hand, inviting him to make the election a fair competition. She admitted she hadn't expected Yuki to be so confident. Yuki's face turned slightly red as he smiled back after their handshake, but then he noticed Chisato watching them from a distance. Chisato immediately scolded Yuki for acting so friendly with someone she saw as an opponent. Yuki tried to explain that it wasn't what she thought. Chisato, clearly frustrated, demanded to know why Yuki could get along so easily with Satsuki and why he hadn't told her about their interaction. Seeing her worked up like that, Yuki lightly tossed her a drink in to get her attention. Not long after, Yuki received a message from Hazuki, who said she was craving meat and boiled potatoes. As Yuki read the message, Chisato was suddenly standing beside him, pressing him for an explanation about what had happened with Satsuki. That evening, Yuki went grocery shopping. While stopping to check his bags, he noticed Mikuru quietly standing behind a utility pole. A moment later, Ayumu came by and peeked into Yuki's shopping bag. Seeing shirataki noodles inside, Ayumu guessed that he might be planning to cook curry. Yuki laughed and explained that shirataki isn't usually used for curry. When he looked back, Mikuru had already disappeared. Ayumu then guessed he might be making a stew instead, with shirataki as a substitute for meat. Later, Yuki visited Hazuki's house and cooked dinner for her. Hazuki was delighted by how delicious his cooking turned out to be. While they were enjoying the meal, Chisato sent Yuki a message asking where he was. Hazuki smirked, guessing that Chisato was the one looking for him, and casually remarked that it must be tough to have someone so possessive. Yuki quickly clarified that Chisato wasn't his girlfriend. After Chisato found out he was at Hazuki's place, she sent a greeting for Yuki for Hazuki. Out of the blue, Hazuki playfully asked how Yuki would feel if the two of them started dating. Yuki told her not to joke like that, but Hazuki replied that it wasn't impossible. After all, she was a girl and he was a guy. Yuki warned that if she kept teasing him like that, he might stop visiting her. Hazuki laughed and said she understood, but she still seemed curious about their situation. Yuki reminded her about a previous incident when she had been tipsy, though Hazuki insisted she remembered everything clearly. Yuki gently asked her to drop the subject. Hazuki promised to be more careful because she didn't want to upset him. She still wanted to enjoy his cooking again in the future. After finishing their meal, Hazuki thanked him warmly. They shared a friendly hug before Yuki said goodbye and headed home. Meanwhile, Mikuru sat alone at a playground, quietly holding a harmonica in her hands. Yuki noticed that a lot of students were running for the student council president position, which made him wonder if he even had a real chance to win. While walking down the hallway, he accidentally bumped into a ladder that had been left leaning against the wall. Startled, he looked up and saw Izara hanging from above, asking for help. Yuki quickly apologized for not noticing the ladder while he was walking. When Izara noticed the campaign poster of Yuki, she smiled and complimented him for running for student council president. Yuki admitted that he actually doubted himself, but for Izara, the fact that he had the courage to enter the election was already impressive. Yuki thanked her and asked what she was doing up there. Izara explained that she was helping with school maintenance because the factory where she usually worked was closed that day and she didn't want to waste her free time doing nothing. Yuki commented that being a scholarship student must be tough, but Izara said she was still grateful because the scholarship allowed her to study at Takafuji High School. She shared that she had 2 younger siblings to support, so if she didn't work hard, she might have to drop out. Suddenly, 2 students walked by and mocked her, saying that someone without money shouldn't try so hard to get into Takafuji. Their words hurt Izara deeply, but she stayed quiet. Yuki was about to confront them, but Izara quickly stopped him. Yuki insisted that staying silent would only make things worse, but Izara explained that those students had always been like that. Looking frustrated, Yuki noticed Izara seemed down and worried about what they said. She hesitantly asked if she really smelled bad, just like those students claimed. Lifting her arms slightly, she asked Yuki to be honest. Flustered, Yuki's face turned red, but he moved closer to reassure her. He carefully checked and told her that she didn't smell bad at all. In fact, she smelled nice and clean. Relieved, Izara thanked him warmly. Later, inside the food research club room, Chisato realized how expensive it was to run a campaign. Mifuyu added that they would definitely need to raise funds since they had no money at all. It seemed that the Security, Finance, and General Affairs departments received campaign funding from the school, but independent candidates like them had to handle everything themselves. Meanwhile, Yuki still couldn't stop thinking about the pleasant scent of Izara earlier, which distracted him so much that he almost said the wrong thing during their discussion. Ai mentioned that candidates who spent huge amounts of money on elections often had questionable motives. He suggested running a low-budget clean campaign, but Yakumo pointed out that even the simplest campaign required expenses, such as printing pamphlets for every student. Even with a bare minimum budget, they would still need a lot of money to attract voters. Yakumo explained that even the city council spent tens of millions of yen every year just to send out telegrams for weddings and funerals. Chisato estimated that they would need around 30,000 to 50,000 yen to run a decent campaign. He wondered if they could use the club's budget, but Hazuki firmly rejected the idea, explaining that the funds were strictly meant for club activities. Using them for a campaign would be considered a misuse of the budget, and the finance department would definitely notice when reviewing their reports. Yakumo warned that if they broke the rules, any victory would be invalid. Yakumo then suggested 2 options. The first was to use their own personal savings. Chisato calculated that if everyone contributed 5,000 yen, they could collect around 40,000 yen, but none of them had that much money to spare. The second option was to hold a bazaar. Yakumo explained that the bazaar was originally introduced as a fundraising event during the preliminary election rounds. Hazuki added that years ago, poorer students were not allowed to run for office and part-time jobs were banned by the school. Because of that, the bazaar tradition started as a way to help raise campaign funds, and eventually it became one of the main events. Everyone agreed that organizing a bazaar would be their best chance to gather funds. Chisato asked what kind of products they could sell. Nozomi suggested the famous Ujima roll, a special cake roll made by Yuki that could only be found in the food research club. She described it as a soft sponge cake filled with smooth, sweet cream and fresh fruit, creating a perfect harmony of flavors that melted in the mouth. Just imagining it made everyone crave it immediately. Chisato then asked how many rolls Yuki could realistically make. After calculating the cost and effort, Yuki admitted that he could only manage a maximum of 20 rolls, which would give them about 12,000 yen in profit. Izara suggested raising the price per slice, but Yuki worried that selling it too expensively would drive people away. He proposed adding a free bonus item with each purchase, but Mifuyu reminded them that giveaways would only add more costs. They started brainstorming ideas for a free incentive that wouldn't cost anything. Yuki jokingly suggested offering photos or handshakes with each purchase, but Ai and he doubted anyone would want that. Chiseto refocused the conversation, saying the real goal was to find a way to sell the Ujima roll at a higher price without increasing their expenses. She decided to handle the marketing strategy herself and simply asked Yuki to prepare the 20 rolls. Finally, Yuki mentioned that once they secured the funds, they also needed to think about what kind of campaign goods they would distribute to voters. Yakumo brought out examples of items used in last year's election. Yuki wondered if that would be considered bribery, but Yakumo explained that as long as the items were officially recognized as candidate pamphlets, it was perfectly acceptable. These goods would include the candidate's name and photo, leaving a lasting impression and helping people remember who to vote for. Ai and Ki wondered who would even want merchandise featuring Yuki, but Oboro admitted that he actually owned a shower curtain with Yuki's picture on it. They did not have enough money or items for their campaign, so Ki suggested using the snacks they had to give away. However, Yakumo reminded everyone that using club funds for campaign purposes would count as misuse. Suddenly, Mikuru came up with the idea of using Yawa sticks. These sticks had not been purchased with club money. Oboro had received them for free. Excited by the idea, Oboro immediately asked his father to send more and boldly ordered 3,000 of them. Yuki said that for now they needed to figure out how to turn the Yawa sticks into proper campaign merchandise. Chiseto wrote the slogan "Protect the Freedom of School Traditions" on the sticks, but Yuki felt that it did not look like an official pamphlet. Yakumo explained that a campaign pamphlet usually included the candidate's name and key issues. To be safe, they decided to take the item to the Campaign Administration Committee for approval. Chiseto asked A and Ki to deliver it, and the two of them quickly went to handle the task. Yuki pointed out that creating the pamphlets by hand would take too long, so Mifuyu suggested using labels instead. Hazuki mentioned that a pack of label sheets containing 20 pages with 10 labels per sheet would cost 1,000 yen. Since they needed 15 sets, it was going to be expensive. Shortly after, Chiseto received a call from the committee. The Yawa sticks were approved as long as the pamphlets were firmly attached to avoid misunderstandings. Chiseto then asked Hazuki if she could lend them some money. Hazuki explained that teachers were not allowed to provide financial support to candidates, but Chiseto argued that lending money was not the same as giving it and promised they would return it after the preliminary elections. After thinking it over, Hazuki pulled out 30,000 yen from inside her clothing and handed it to them. Chiseto expressed her deep gratitude, and the group felt relieved and excited to move forward with their campaign plans. When the Yawa sticks finally arrived, everyone felt exhausted just imagining how long it would take to attach all the labels. Nozomi encouraged them not to worry and proudly introduced her invention, a machine called Harry Harry. To their surprise, the machine was not designed to apply labels. It was actually a shoulder massage machine meant to relax them after work. The name Harry Harry stood for Hydraulic Adjustable Realignment Intelligent Hand Manipulator, a complicated way of saying it was a multifunctional massage device. In the end, they still had to attach all the labels manually. Yuki estimated that it would take one person 10 hours to finish, but if 10 people worked together, it could be done in just 1 hour. Unfortunately, Hazuki could not help, and Chiseto and Oboro needed to join Yakumo to set up the campaign booth, leaving only 5 people to handle the task. To make things slower, Yuki also had to leave his shop for Ujima rolls. While Yuki was walking his bike loaded with groceries past the booths being set up, he noticed that many groups seemed to be running for election, mainly so they could sell goods. The booths were packed with items such as decorations, clothes, chairs, computers, musical instruments, and even motorcycles. Some were even selling animals that were regulated under the Washington Convention. Yuki then spotted 2 members of the Sumo Club arguing with Satsuki. They were upset about their budget being cut even though their club had a long history of achievements. Yuki stepped forward thinking Satsuki might need help, but soon realized this was not the traditional sumo club. It was a mock sumo club. The member, Ruzeki, proudly claimed to be a champion. Satsuki explained that she had found suspicious expenses in their budget. It turned out that most of their funds were being spent on sumo stew. She questioned whether such a huge amount of stew was really necessary for their activities. Satsuki pointed out that if Ruzeki truly intended to practice mock sumo, he should be eating mock sumo stew instead. The club members could not argue back and, in a playful attempt to drive Satsuki away, sprinkled imitation salt around her. After Satsuki left, the 2 members hugged each other and admitted that Satsuki was far too tough to deal with. Meanwhile, Nozomi and the others were starting to feel exhausted from sticking labels, and the work was still far from finished. At one point, Mikuru shook her body because some labels had gotten stuck to her skirt. While trying to spin around a tree to get them off, she ended up tripping after getting tangled in some cloth. Yuki was walking together with Satsuki, and Satsuki explained that during every investigation she kept finding parts of the budget being wasted on small, unnecessary things. To reduce these wasteful expenses, she continued her inspections even during the election campaign, since she was still serving as the head of the finance department. According to her, the student council election had nothing to do with her financial duties. Yuki commented that Satsuki was being too hard on herself, but she replied that she was simply being stubborn. Takafuji Private Academy valued the freedom of its students, which meant that most of the administrative authority rested in the hands of the student organization. The student council was responsible for managing the academy's internal authority, so it could handle things too loosely. The school could quickly fall into disarray. Yuki asked if the academy's situation was really serious enough to require so many budget cuts. Satsuki responded by asking whether Yuki had read the entire financial report. She suspected he might have only focused on the sections about club disbandment and other obvious points, but she hoped he would carefully review everything. She emphasized that club reforms were not only about reducing budgets. At that time, Izuru was busy helping with school maintenance. She was so tired that it seemed unlikely she could finish her tasks that day. As she paused for a moment, she looked at Yuki's campaign poster and quietly said that he was amazing. Suddenly, a group of female students approached her and pressured her to come with them. Izuru looked frightened and couldn't resist. Meanwhile, Yuki had arrived at the club room and immediately opened Satsuki's financial report, carefully reading every page of the document. At the same time, Izuru was being harassed by the group of girls. As the day turned to evening, Yuki walked home with Chisato and Mifyu. They were exhausted from the day's work but happy to have finished everything on time. Yuki looked unusually gloomy, which made Chisato ask what was bothering him. Mifyu mentioned that he had been acting that way since returning from shopping. Suddenly, they noticed Izuru searching for something nearby. Yuki and the others approached her and asked if she needed help. Izuru abruptly shouted that she was fine, then quickly apologized and repeated that she was really okay. Later that night, Izuru returned to her maintenance work. She looked sad, still shaken from the harassment earlier that day. The girls who had confronted her had accused her of showing off by claiming to know an upperclassman and even spread a cruel rumor that she was trying to get his attention. In an act meant to embarrass her, they took a personal item of hers and threw it in the trash, leaving her deeply upset. Because of this emotional strain, Izuru accidentally knocked over a lamp while working, as she was too distracted to focus. To save the Food Research Club, Yuki decided to take part in the Student Council presidential election. His friends agreed and joined the campaign to support him. That day, 3,600 pamphlets for all the distribution points were finally completed. Chisato reminded Yuki to finish making the Ujima roll by the end of the day. Mifyu promised to write the best speech she could. Chisato teased that if Mifyu ran into trouble, Yuki would probably stay up all night to help her, but Mifyu insisted that she could handle it on her own. Yuki thanked her, held her hand, and confessed his feelings, asking Mifyu to be his girlfriend. However, Mifyu gently admitted that she already loved someone else. Despite that, the three of them continued their usual friendly banter. Suddenly, Oboro opened the door and saw the scene, which made Yuki feel embarrassed, though it was already too late to hide anything. Omuro commented that Chisato looked especially happy, and Mifyu added that Chisato must really love Yuki. Chisato quickly denied it, saying there was no way she could fall for an idiot like Yuki. Yuki joked that Oboro should already realize how Chisato treated him like a servant. Annoyed, Chisato pressed her foot against Yuki's leg in protest. Mifyu called Yuki hopeless and gently patted his head. Even though Yuki tried to act indifferent on the outside, deep down he had already fallen for Mifyu. Later that day, Yuki prepared to make more Ujima rolls while Mifyu cheered him on. Yuki asked if Mifyu was okay with skipping class, since her attendance record was still low. Mifyu said she was healthy and hadn't taken many sick days, so it wasn't a problem. Yuki mentioned that this was his chance to repay Chisato for all the kindness she had shown him. Thanks to Chisato, Mifyu was able to enjoy her time at school despite her past difficulties. When Mifyu first transferred there, she had been held back a year after taking time off for surgery. Because she was older than her classmates, everyone kept a certain distance, speaking to her politely and treating her differently, which left her feeling uneasy. It was Chisato who stepped in and helped her feel comfortable. Yuki said that Chisato probably didn't even think much about it, since Chisato naturally spoke casually with everyone. But for Mifyu, Chisato's kindness meant everything, and she was deeply grateful. That was why she wanted to do her best to help Chisato and to protect the Food Research Club that she had grown to love so much. While Yuki worked on the cake batter, Mifyu focused on writing her speech. After finishing the batter, Yuki baked it, added cream and fruit, and rolled it carefully. Before long, he had completed 2 rolls. Mifyu praised his work and mentioned the names Samantha and Tabitha, explaining they were a witch and her daughter from an old television show. Yuki was surprised that Mifyu knew something so vintage. A little while later, Yuki finished his 6th Ujima roll and asked for the time. Mifyu responded with another one of her old-fashioned jokes. Not long after, a girl named Hidaka, a reporter from the school news outlet ASP, arrived. She said she was compiling a list of student council presidential candidates and wanted to interview Yuki. However, Hidaka mispronounced Yuki's last name while taking notes. When Yuki politely asked her to correct the spelling, Hidaka misunderstood and wrote it down as if it were his main campaign policy. She even jotted down Yuki's casual remarks as if they were official messages from a candidate. After finishing the interview, Hidaka left, ignoring Yuki's attempts to clear up the confusion. By then, Yuki had already completed his 8th role. Although Mifyu had already finished writing her speech, she pretended it was taking longer because she simply wanted to spend more time with Yuki. Oboro dropped by again to check on Yuki's progress. Yuki assured him that he could finish everything that day. Oboro joked about wanting to taste some of the creamy filling and playfully wiped a bit of cream off Yuki's face before leaving. Yuki kept working carefully, taking his time so he could stay with Mifyu a little longer, while Mifyu quietly watched him with a peaceful smile. Soon after, Nozomi arrived and asked about something called the Angel's Share. Yuki explained that it referred to the small amount of alcohol that naturally evaporates during the aging process in a barrel. Nozomi happily confirmed the answer and teased that 1 out of every 10 pieces of the Ujima roll should belong to the Angel's Share. Of course, her playful comment was just a way to ask for a piece of the cake. Yuki quickly caught on and said he wouldn't give her any at that moment, but promised to save some for her next time. Nozomi pouted and looked like she might cry, so Yuki finally promised to give her all the end pieces from the 20 Ujima rolls he planned to make. Nozomi cheered with delight, calling Yuki a true friend before leaving with a big smile. Yuki and Mifyu shared the end piece of the Ujima roll. The slice was warm and sweet, just like the time they were spending together. When Yuki was almost done with his work, Mifyu offered to make some tea. Yuki gladly accepted and Mifyu went off to prepare it. Not long after, Hazuki arrived to check on Yuki's progress. She leaned in close as she spoke, making Yuki wonder why she came. Hazuki explained that she was worried about him. Without warning, she sat casually on Yuki's laps, saying that he hadn't stopped by to cook at her house since the campaign began, and it made her feel a little lonely. When Mifyu returned carrying the tea, Hazuki quickly stood up and excused herself, saying she had something else to do. Mifyu placed the tea on the table with a calm smile. Even though she stayed cheerful, Mifyu secretly wished Yuki's attention wouldn't be distracted. More than anything, she wanted him to focus on Chisato and make sure Chisato stayed happy. Yuki reassured her not to worry, telling her he cared deeply for Chisato in his own way. Before long, Izara arrived and introduced herself as someone sent by the Election Administration Committee. She explained that each scholarship student had been assigned to assist a different candidate as a general helper. From now until the end of the campaign, she would be supporting Yuki, and she happily admitted how excited she was to work with him. Out of more than 100 student council candidates, it felt like fate that she was paired with Yuki. Yuki agreed with a smile, though Mifyu couldn't hide a hint of unease at how easily Yuki and Izara seemed to connect. Izara soon met the entire food research club and politely introduced herself, promising to do her best for the team. Yuki felt lucky that their booth had been placed right next to the main stage, a perfect spot arranged by Yakumo. The Takafuji Private Academy election event was about to begin. Students bustled around, excited to visit the different booths. The finance department's booth was especially crowded, with Satsuki attracting a lot of attention from the crowd. Ari and Ki showed up carrying merchandise from a rival campaign, which surprised Chisato. Yuki playfully called it a little bit of reconnaissance. The items A and He brought featured Mohiji's image, which Yuki found amusing, though he admitted the general affairs team seemed quite capable and hard to beat. Yuki was also surprised to see Miyaru and Reiji selling goods at their booth. Chisato explained that it was their way of returning the favor as the president and vice president of the Election Alliance. When Yuki asked why he hadn't heard about this plan, Chisato teased him for not noticing her secret arrangements. Nearby, Mekia displayed handmade figurines and garage kits, while Miyaru sold her self-published comics. As the crowd grew larger, Chisato urged everyone to get ready and reminded Yuki to prepare for his campaign speech. Unfortunately, Yuki had forgotten the printed script at home and hadn't fully memorized the long text. He at least needed a quick review before stepping on stage. Mifyu volunteered to print another copy right away. Meanwhile, Chisato and the others began handing out fun campaign sticks to draw more attention from students. Mikuru struggled to hand them out because of her soft voice, eventually giving one to a rare animal at a nearby booth instead. Reiji and Miyaru's booth became especially busy, which Yuki noted was the perfect time for them to sell their merchandise. Mikuru slowly gained confidence and started distributing more pamphlets as well. Soon, Chisato signaled Yuki that it was time to start selling Ujima rolls. Mifyu finished printing but accidentally brought one of her own stories instead of the speech. Flustered, she quickly reprinted the correct script. As the Ujima roll sales began, Nozomi shouted that the price was 300 yen. Yuki was confused since they had all agreed on 190 yen. Nozomi explained that it was Chisado's idea. Customers would be served by a cosplayer of their choice. A moment later, A and Ki appeared on stage in cosplay outfits and the crowd cheered. They announced that anyone who wanted a photo with them would need to buy an Ujima roll with a photo ticket, raising the price to 500 yen. Excited male students immediately rushed to purchase the rolls. Yuki was amazed at how quickly the plan increased their sales. Shiseido proudly asked for his opinion on her clever idea, catching him off guard when he noticed that she herself was wearing an elaborate cosplay costume. She playfully twirled around to show off her outfit, drawing plenty of attention from the crowd. Oboro soon joined in, also wearing a costume. Two female students gushed over how charming Oboro looked, even joking that he and Yuki looked like characters from their favorite magazine. Not long after, Miyaru announced that it was time for Oboro and Yuki to go up on stage next. Miyaru asked Yuki and Oboro to act out a scene where they fed each other, similar to what is often shown in boys' love stories. Yuki was shocked when he saw the suggested illustration that looked a lot like both of them. Miyaru explained that she was selling that magazine for 1,000 yen, including special requests, and then handed it to Yuki and Oboro. Oboro said there was no choice but to go along with it, even though Yuki was clearly annoyed by the situation. Oboro reminded him that it was all for the campaign fund. When Oboro fed Yuki with a snack stick, the girls around them screamed in excitement and took pictures. The next part of the plan involved a back hug, just like in the magazine, but Yuki decided to run away before it could happen. It was finally time for the candidates to give their speeches, but Yuki still hadn't received his speech draft. Not long after, Mifuyu arrived and apologized for being late. Chisato told her it was fine since it was also Yuki's fault for forgetting to bring the draft. Yuki held Mifuyu's hand and thanked her, then admitted that he loved her very much. Mifuyu, flustered, nervously said that she loved someone else. The practice play they were supposed to perform was about to continue, but Chisato reminded them that there was no time to act out such a scene. Yuki quickly got up to leave, but Chisato followed him to fix his tie. After that, she gently pushed him forward and gave him a light kiss on the back. Yuki immediately went to the waiting room to prepare for his turn. While waiting, Yuki sat face-to-face with Mohaiji. Mohaiji introduced himself and explained that the financial report of the Food Research Club was focused on maintaining the club's freedom to carry out its activities. He believed this approach went against the financial department's budget plan. Mohaiji said that Yuki's campaign program followed a similar path, so he would be very grateful for Yuki's support after the preliminary round. However, Yuki replied that he had no intention of ending his campaign during the preliminaries and was determined to move forward, which meant he would not be supporting Mohaiji. Mohaiji laughed and encouraged Yuki to keep following the path he believed in, though it might lead to a dead end. He promised that if that happened, he would be there to guide Yuki, and he kindly asked for Yuki's support. Soon after, it was Mohaiji's turn to give his speech. Meanwhile, Chisato thanked Mifuyu for her help and told her to take a break. Mifuyu opened a folder containing her own written story, thinking of throwing it away, but she realized that what she was holding was actually the speech draft. Mifuyu suddenly understood that she had accidentally given Yuki the wrong document, while at the same time Yuki was about to open the speech draft she had just handed to him. The preliminary day of the election bazaar went smoothly. Chisato kept promoting the Ujima rolls, while Miyaru enthusiastically offered her BL books to visitors. However, during all the excitement, Mifuyu looked restless, clearly unsure of what she should do. Michiru encouraged the visitors to support Yuki, while Aisara, noticing Mifuyu's uneasiness, asked what was troubling her. Oboro guessed that Mifuyu must have been nervous because the speech she had typed would soon be read out in public. Chisato tried to calm Mifuyu, assuring her that everything would be fine and that she would surely handle her task perfectly as always. But that was not what Mifuyu was worried about. It seemed she needed to deliver an important script as soon as possible. Unfortunately, before she could act, Yuki's turn to speak was suddenly announced. Hearing this, Mifuyu fainted on the spot. Yuki himself was caught off guard, realizing he had not even reviewed the contents of his speech. Yet, it turned out that there had been a miscommunication. The next turn actually belonged to Mohaiji. As soon as Mohaiji stepped up to the podium, the students cheered loudly. He greeted everyone confidently, and Yuki, watching from a nearby monitor, was surprised by how warmly the crowd welcomed him. Mohaiji reminded everyone not to choose the wrong successor for the student council president. He criticized the large and unnecessary expenses linked to the embarrassing Usawa incident and placed the blame on the security department that had been responsible for it. Mohaiji promised that if he were elected as the next student council president, he would scrutinize every detail of the budget and cut any unnecessary spending. He also hinted that while other candidates might sound promising, the students needed to think carefully about who was actually behind the budget planning. Yuki quickly realized that Mohaiji was indirectly targeting Satsuki with these accusations. Mohiji even claimed that Satsuki had approved suspicious budget allocations. Yuki was surprised to see that Mohiji's sharp statements were actually winning sympathy from the crowd. Mohiji ended by urging the students to vote for an honest candidate like himself. Yuki thought he no longer had time to listen to the other candidates because he desperately needed to review his own speech. Soon it was Satsuki's turn to speak. Before heading to the podium, Satsuki approached Yuki and encouraged him to do his best. The moment Satsuki appeared on stage, her supporters erupted in cheers, passionately showing their full support. Meanwhile, Mifyu had regained consciousness and immediately asked if Yuki had already given his speech. Shiseido quickly explained that Yuki had not yet spoken, prompting Mifyu to rush off in search of him. On stage, Satsuki explained that the student council's income and expense budget had become unstable due to a series of systematic changes in student council activities. Mohiji, watching from the side, commented that Satsuki was outspoken and intimidating. According to him, Satsuki indeed had strong, pure policies that carefully considered the well-being of both the school and the student council, and her popularity was undeniable. Her straightforward personality made her words sound convincing, but he suggested that such honesty could also backfire. Mohiji seemed to intentionally make these remarks within Yuki's hearing range. Satsuki continued her speech, presenting her plan for bold, long-term reforms aimed at preserving the highest possible level of student autonomy. The students responded enthusiastically to her proposals. Yuki, however, struggled to focus on his own preparation. When he finally looked at the script in front of him, he started doubting whether it was truly his speech. While Satsuki's speech grew more passionate, Mifyu kept running toward Yuki with the real draft in her hands. The paper Yuki was reading contained Mifyu's heartfelt words, revealing her feelings that Yuki belonged with Shiseido and that she would be happy as long as Yuki and Shiseido were happy together. Mifyu eventually reached the waiting room where Yuki was supposed to be, frantically searching for him. By then, Satsuki had finished her speech with a warm declaration of love and gratitude toward everyone. Yuki, however, stared at the paper in front of him, realizing that what he held was not a speech at all, but rather a love letter from Mifyu. The discovery only made him more unsettled. Not long after, Yuki's name was called. He had no choice but to prepare himself despite not having reviewed his actual speech. Mifyu finally spotted Yuki, but was too late. He was already walking toward the podium. She tried calling out to him, but the staff prevented her from entering the stage area. Yuki kept moving forward. From below the podium, Satsuki watched him closely. As Yuki climbed the steps, he suddenly stumbled and fell, scattering the papers he carried. He quickly got back on his feet and glanced around, noticing Shiseido, who was making sure he was okay. Wiping the blood from his face, Yuki steadied himself and began to speak. His first words were a request for everyone to laugh, which immediately brought cheerful laughter from the students. He introduced himself properly, clarifying that his last name was Ujima, not Ushima, reminding everyone that a misspelled name could invalidate their votes. Yuki then asked the students to choose him as their president, promising to stop the drastic club reform plans. He explained that many clubs were currently facing budget cuts, forced mergers, or even disbandment, including his own food research club. Yuki vowed to do everything he could to prevent such disbandments, insisting that all students were in the same situation, and that he needed their votes to protect their activities. His passionate words stirred excitement among the crowd, earning their enthusiastic support. Before closing, Yuki also shared the 7 pledges of the Food Research Club, giving the audience a glimpse of the club's fun and dedication. After all the candidates finished their speeches, it was finally time for the students to cast their votes and decide the next student council president. After that, Yuki was completely exhausted and lay down in the clubroom. His friends told him that he had done a great job. Yuki honestly could not remember anything he had said earlier. Hazuki mentioned that people seemed to really respond well to Yuki's speech. Nozomi admitted that she felt excited when she heard Yuki's speech, and Oboro even called it impressive. Ai said she never expected that something which started with the 7 vows of the Food Research Club would turn into a story about the creation of the universe and the history of Yukin. And Ki was surprised to learn that Yukin actually came from a dish originally made with lamb. Yuki still had no memory of what he had said. Isara believed that even though Yuki could not remember his own words, everyone who heard the speech would never forget it. Yuki apologized to Mifyu since she had gone through so much trouble to prepare a script, but he had been too nervous to even review it. Mifyu snatched the script back and said that Yuki's speech was far better than anything she had written, in praising his natural talent. Not long after, Hidaka entered the Food Research Clubroom to deliver news that the live online broadcast of the preliminary election would start soon and that he would be reporting it directly. Yuki was puzzled about why Hidaka was wearing a male uniform, but Hidaka calmly explained that he was a boy and naturally wore the male uniform. That afternoon, Haritachi, who served as the host for the ASP preliminary election coverage, announced that there was a voter turnout of 98.4%. This meant that a candidate needed at least 604 votes to advance to the next round. Some of the candidates predicted to pass included Satsuki from the Finance Department and Mohiji from the General Affairs Department. Hiratachi also introduced other candidates chosen by the ASP, including Yuki, whose main policy was the correction of names and whose message emphasized not leaving anyone behind. Shiseto could not understand what Yuki had actually done, but Yuki explained that he had simply given a proper answer, even though Hidaka quoted him in a way that made it sound more dramatic. The live broadcast then switched to Hidaka reporting from inside the Food Research Clubroom. He described the atmosphere there, noting how there were a few smiles before the vote counting began, but the mood quickly turned serious once it started. Yuki wondered why everyone was getting so nervous just because of a live online broadcast. The first update came in, 100 votes had been counted, which was 1.7% of the total, and Yuki was in third place with 8% of the votes. Everyone started to worry because Yuki needed at least 10% overall to advance. Hazuki reminded them that it was still the beginning of the count, so the votes from the senior students had likely not been included yet. According to Hazuki, many senior students tended to spread their votes outside the three main departments as a way of showing support before graduating. With only 100 votes counted so far, there were still 60 more updates to go before the final tally. Time passed as they continued to wait for more updates. By the 15th update, Yuki had received 182 votes, which was 9.2%. In fourth place was IAM, who had 8.8%, slightly higher than her previous 8.6%. This meant there was a serious competitor aside from Yuki. Reiji explained that IAM attracted voters by presenting herself as a true revolutionary who did not belong to any of the three main departments. Where her support came from remained a mystery, as Miyaru had investigated various rumors but could not find anything solid. Isara remained confident that Yuki would still be fine even if IAM managed to reach 10%. However, Satsuki warned that it would be almost impossible for Yuki to win if a fourth candidate advanced to the final round, because the votes would then be split between Yuki and IAM, leaving no chance for Yuki to surpass Satsuki and Mohaiji. Before long, the latest update showed that Yuki had finally reached 10% of the total votes, with 94.4% of all ballots counted. That meant Yuki had secured 571 votes, greatly increasing his chances of moving forward. Hazuki felt confident they would make it, since they had begun receiving votes from the senior students. Even so, they could not relax because IAM's votes had climbed to 9.8%. Hidaka then announced that Yuki was projected to pass with 97.7% of the votes counted, marking the first time in 7 years that a candidate outside the three main departments could advance. Hidaka continued his live coverage from the Food Research Clubroom, noting how excitement filled the room when Yuki's projected victory was announced, but the atmosphere quickly became serious again as everyone waited for the final results and the announcement of the fourth candidate. At that point, IAM had 9.9% of the votes with 584 ballots in her favor, meaning she needed just 20 more votes to qualify. With 140 votes still uncounted, it was entirely possible for IAM to get those remaining votes. Yuki felt frustrated, realizing that even though their team was projected to pass, they still could not celebrate until the very end. With 99.3% of the votes counted, Yuki received 608 votes, which confirmed that he had safely passed the preliminary round. Meanwhile, IAM had 596 votes, and if she gained just 8 more, Yuki's chance of advancing would have been in danger. The atmosphere was incredibly tense as everyone continued to wait for the final update. Shiseto held Yuki's hand to help him stay calm, and not only that, she also held Izara's hand. Soon, everyone joined in, holding hands together as a show of unity while they awaited the final results. Before long, the last update was announced. IAM ended up with 602 votes, or 9.9% of the total, which meant she did not qualify. Yuki became the only independent candidate to advance to the next round of the Student Council presidential election. Their group erupted in cheers, celebrating the first big success they had achieved together. Hazuki was overjoyed and mentioned she would have a celebratory drink later that night. Momoro was deeply moved, almost unable to believe what had just happened. Reiji called it a miracle, though Miyaru admitted she had already expected this outcome. Michiru was thrilled as well and offered her congratulations to Yuki. Unexpectedly, Reiji and Miyaru presented some money, explaining that it was a portion of their sales profits. They understood that campaigning required a lot of resources, and their contribution, while not as large as the funds available to the finance department or the general affairs department, could still help. Shiseto expressed her gratitude and promised to use the money wisely. Yuki also thanked them all and vowed to give his best effort in the final election. Miyaru and Reiji encouraged him not to lose hope no matter what obstacles might come his way. Isara then invited everyone to cheer together, and they all shouted in celebration of Yuki's success in the preliminary round. During that joyful moment, Hidaka recorded the group's excitement and teamwork. Meanwhile, one of Yakumo's subordinates informed Yuki that IAM's identity had actually been a setup orchestrated by the Katahira faction. Yakumo commented that it seemed the Katahira group was trying to prevent him from carrying out his plans. To stay prepared, Yakumo instructed his team to gather detailed information on the people supporting Yuki. That day, Yuki walked home with Chisato, Mifuyu, and Asara. After being announced as one of the candidates who passed the preliminary round, Yuki was surprised at how smoothly everything had gone. It meant he was now one step closer to becoming the student council president. Chisato reminded him that even though he had cleared the first stage, it didn't mean he had already won the election, and she encouraged everyone to do their best for the upcoming camping trip. Mifuyu and Azara promised they would give their all for tomorrow's event. They were all happy with the hard work they had accomplished that day. Mifuyu and Azara parted ways with Yuki and Chisato near a street intersection. After that, Chisato invited Yuki to stop by a convenience store to buy some chocolate. When they arrived home, Chisato shared the chocolate with Yuki. She was delighted that something good had happened to them that day. Yuki felt certain that Daiki-kun would have been happy for them too. Chisato then placed a piece of chocolate in front of a photo of a young child. The next day, Yuki and his friends gathered in the Food Research Club room. Yakumo congratulated him with a handshake and praised his team for working so well together during the preliminary round. He pointed out, however, that there was still a lot of work ahead. Yakumo began explaining their strategy for the Student Council presidential election. He showed the vote counts from the previous round. Yuki had reached the target of 600 votes, but Satsuki had received 2,700 votes and Mohaiji had gained 1,500 votes. Yakumo admitted that the numbers looked discouraging, but he asked everyone not to give up. He understood how they felt after seeing those results. However, Yakumo revealed that those numbers were not the true picture. He explained that the votes shown were the base votes, which were guaranteed for each faction and would not shift to another candidate, no matter what happened. Yuki asked if his 600 votes were considered base votes. Mifuyu suggested that maybe many of Yuki's supporters had simply voted for fun. Yakumo agreed that it might look that way, but even if it was just casual voting, their candidate still managed to pass the preliminary stage, and in a rather dramatic way at that. Hazuki thought most people would start supporting Yuki from that point onward. Yakumo then explained that if there were 6,000 students in total, with 3,000 base votes already locked, the remaining 3,000 were free votes. He believed Yuki could win those free votes if he could influence the undecided voters. One clue lay with IM, a candidate who had almost passed the preliminary round. Yuki realized he needed to show people that he was not tied to any particular department. He asked how that would convince voters to support him. Yuki explained that the finance department and the general affairs department were both part of the student council, so to many people, this election might look like an internal power struggle. Chisato pointed out that Yuki was different because he was a complete outsider, which gave him a special kind of credibility. Hazuki added that Yuki was like a third-party candidate trying to challenge the old system. Nozomi admitted she hadn't expected that strategy to actually influence voters, while Mifuyu felt it was a strong approach to counter Satsuki. Yakumo elaborated that Satsuki's campaign presented her as a revolutionary, but in reality she was still part of the finance department and a member of the student council. Chisato commented that if there was a revolutionary from within the system and an outsider like Yuki at the same time, it would create a powerful impression. Yakumo was confident that the voters would be swayed and that as many as 1,700 free votes could shift in Yuki's favor. After the meeting, Yuki and his friends worked together to make a huge campaign banner. Ali and Ki remarked that Yakumo was truly a professional and a reliable guy. Ki was sure that Yakumo must be very popular. It turned out that 99% of Yakumo's votes in the previous year had come from female students. Later, while Yuki was cooking with Asara, he wondered why A and Ki kept getting excited whenever they talked about Yakumo. Asara said many girls like guys who could cook because it was such a useful skill. Yuki was listening so intently to Asara that he accidentally cut his finger with a knife. Chisato immediately rushed over to check on him, but she was startled when she saw Izura gently put Yuki's finger in her mouth to stop the bleeding. Mifuyu and Hazuki were also surprised by her sudden action. Izura calmly explained that she was only trying to stop the bleeding. Chisato and Hazuki were clearly upset, but they couldn't really say anything. Mifuyu mentioned that Izura didn't need to go that far, but Izura said she always did that for her younger siblings. When the conversation turned to younger brothers, Chisato was reminded of her own younger brother who had passed away after being hit by a bus. Chisato told Izura that she shouldn't do things like that because Yuki was not her little brother. Izura then carefully placed a bandage on Yuki's finger. Yuki felt puzzled when he noticed Chisato quietly watching him. That evening, Yuki and his friends enjoyed dinner together. Yuki asked how the food tasted, and Michiru said it was delicious. Nozomi even called Yuki's homemade Japanese curry perfect and incredibly satisfying. Izura thanked him and said she was happy they all enjoyed it. Chisato offered to wash the dishes so Yuki and Izura could rest, but Izura politely declined, saying it was her job. Chiseto reminded her to head home soon so her younger siblings wouldn't be left waiting. Mifuyu assured Azara not to worry about her. Azara thanked everyone warmly before leaving. That night, Yuki was relaxing in the outdoor bath. As he absent-mindedly brought his finger toward his mouth, Chisato suddenly called out to him. She walked over and joined him in the bath. Yuki's face stiffened with tension, but Chisato casually told him there was no need to act so shy. She recalled how, when they were children, she and Yuki often bathed together. Yuki asked why she was there, but Chisato simply said she did not need any reason to be by his side. She then rested her head on his shoulder. Feeling uneasy, Yuki suggested they leave the bath so they would not feel dizzy from staying too long. Chisato teasingly asked why Yuki was not making any move, wondering if he did not want to get closer to her. Before Yuki could respond, Oboro suddenly appeared, intending to join the bath. Yuki tried to stop him because he did not want Oboro to notice Chisato's presence, but Chisato had already hidden herself. When Oboro stepped in, Yuki's towel slipped and Oboro gave a small amused smile at the awkward situation. Later that night, after leaving the bath, Yuki took a walk around the camp. He came across Satsuki and Hazuki having a heated discussion. Soon Satsuki noticed Yuki standing nearby. Hazuki greeted him and Yuki quickly apologized, explaining that he had not meant to eavesdrop. Satsuki admitted it was her own fault for talking in such an open place. Yuki continued apologizing until Satsuki playfully warned that she would start calling him Pico if he kept saying sorry. Hazuki, surprised by their friendly exchange, remarked that she would not let Yuki carelessly charm other girls since he had already shared a kiss with her. After saying this, Hazuki walked away and Satsuki soon followed. Later, Yuki prepared to sleep in the same room as Oboro. Yuki was surprised to see that Oboro used a large number of alarm clocks. Oboro explained that he had only brought 10 clocks with him and actually used even more at home because he had trouble waking up. He joked that if he failed to wake up, he would rely on Yuki to help him. Still teasing, Oboro hoped Yuki would wake him up in a special way if necessary. Yuki found the joke irritating and tried to ignore him. Oboro admitted he had trouble falling asleep without his usual pillow and half-jokingly asked Yuki to let him use him as a body pillow. Without waiting for a reply, Oboro wrapped his arms around Yuki and locked him in a tight hold. Yuki struggled to move but could not escape. After half an hour, Yuki urgently needed to use the restroom and tried to free himself, but Oboro refused to let go. Yuki finally pretended to hear Mohaiji's voice to distract him, and the trick worked. Oboro released him, allowing Yuki to hurry out. On his way, Yuki spotted Hazuki sitting alone in the garden. Concerned, he approached her. Hazuki, who seemed a bit unsteady, nearly lost her balance, and Yuki quickly helped her. She was clearly tipsy and repeatedly asked for affection in her cheerful, uninhibited state. Yuki carefully supported her and guided her back to the campsite. Since male students were not allowed inside the girls' area, he stopped at the entrance, but Hazuki insisted that he help her all the way to her room. Most of the girls were already asleep, but Chisato was still awake and heard Hazuki's voice outside. Yuki escorted Hazuki inside, but as he quietly closed the door, another girl caught sight of him and shouted. The commotion woke several girls, who immediately began searching for the intruder. Yuki managed to hide and quickly looked for a safe place. He ended up near Satsuki's room, and Satsuki promptly helped him inside. A few moments later, the girls knocked on Satsuki's door, asking if she had seen anyone suspicious nearby. Satsuki calmly denied it and asked if the person had done anything inappropriate. The girls replied that nothing harmful had happened, but said they would continue to check the area. Satsuki reminded them to stay calm so as not to disturb those sleeping and told them to make sure all the girls locked their doors. After the group left, Yuki thanked Satsuki for saving him. She warned him that he still was not completely safe and reminded him that entering the girls' area was against the rules. Yuki admitted he had not realized how serious the situation looked and asked why Satsuki was willing to help him. Satsuki explained that she was starting to understand him better and believed he had a reason for being there. After Yuki shared everything that had happened, Satsuki apologized for unintentionally dragging him into her own troubles. Yuki felt relieved that she understood. Satsuki then questioned why Yuki seemed so close to Hazuki, pointing out that an ordinary student would not normally carry a teacher who had been drinking all the way to her room. Yuki explained that Hazuki was the advisor for the food research club, so it felt natural for him to assist her. Satsuki argued that Yuki should have called a female club member instead to avoid any misunderstandings and hinted that she suspected there might be something more between Yuki and Hazuki. Yuki firmly denied it, but Satsuki remained doubtful and half-jokingly warned that if he was lying, she might tell everyone what had happened that night. Yuki never expected Satsuki to sound so threatening, but she explained that she only wanted to know what really happened. Satsuki said she would act as if nothing had ever happened as long as Yuki told her the truth. She asked whether Yuki had really kissed Hazuki, and Yuki admitted it. although he insisted that it was just an accident. Satsuki moved a little closer and said she suspected Yuki had felt like he had no real choice, and that because of the unexpected kiss, Yuki had stayed near Hazuki when she was drunk. Satsuki believed it showed that Yuki cared about her. Yuki admitted that he neither disliked nor loved Hazuki. Hearing that, Satsuki felt relieved and, as promised, said she would let the incident from that night go. Yuki thanked her and prepared to leave, but Satsuki asked if he was sure about stepping out of the room. According to her, some of the girls were still wandering the hallway, so she suggested he wait in her room for about an hour until things calmed down. Yuki said he did not want to bother Satsuki any longer, which made her ask for a small favor in return so that he would not feel guilty. To Yuki's surprise, Satsuki casually took off her jacket and gave him a playful smile. Meanwhile, Chisato helped Hazuki back to her room. That night, Mikuru stood alone on the rooftop, quietly gazing at the sky. That night, Yuki was still at the camp and hiding inside Satsuki's room. From the outside, their conversation sounded suspicious, as if they were up to something inappropriate, but in reality, they were simply playing Japanese chess. Satsuki ended up winning the game and teased Yuki by calling him a terrible player. Once again, she gave him a strange nickname, which Yuki clearly did not like. Meanwhile, the girls were on patrol in the hallway, wondering why the intruder had not been caught yet. Satsuki told Yuki that the girls probably would not stop searching until they found him. Yuki asked how he could get out of the situation, and Satsuki offered him two options. He could either turn himself in, or he could stay with her forever. Then, with a playful smile, she added a third option. He could stay and play more shogi with her while waiting a little longer. Yuki chose the third option, joking that if things did not work out, he might end up choosing the second one. Satsuki asked if he was really sure about that and teased him by wondering what Hazuki would say if she knew. Yuki insisted that Hazuki had nothing to do with this, but Satsuki suddenly brought up the time Yuki accidentally kissed Hazuki. Embarrassed, Yuki quickly explained that it had been an accident. Satsuki then asked what would happen if she were the one to force a kiss on him. Would Yuki also call that an accident? Yuki was left speechless, and Satsuki chuckled before inviting him to continue their game. In the middle of the match, Satsuki asked if Yuki had ever heard of the real reason Hazuki left home. Satsuki shared that Hazuki once shut herself away, refusing to speak to anyone in the family. Satsuki had asked their parents, but they could not help either. Hazuki remained silent and eventually left home. Ever since then, their mother had been deeply worried and depressed. Satsuki desperately wanted to help but had no idea what to do. She thought Hazuki seemed more open with Yuki and believed that maybe Hazuki would tell him someday, but Yuki admitted that Hazuki had never mentioned anything to him. After checking the hallway, Satsuki said it was probably time for Yuki to leave and suggested using the emergency stairs since the girls might still be patrolling. Once outside the girls' arena building, Yuki thanked Satsuki sincerely for helping him escape. Satsuki said she had enjoyed spending time with him and hoped they could hang out again. Before they parted, she once again playfully asked if Yuki would consider it an accident if she really did force a kiss on him. Yuki grew nervous as Satsuki leaned in closer, making his face turn bright red. Just then, they spotted Hazuki buying a drink. Hazuki walked over to Yuki, and for a moment, Satsuki thought Hazuki was about to kiss him. Instead, Hazuki suddenly sprayed her drink all over Yuki's face, laughed mischievously, and walked away. Neither of them noticed that Michiru had seen everything from the rooftop. The next morning, A told everyone that there had been a suspicious intruder wandering around the girls' camp the previous night. Yuki was shocked to hear this. According to A, the incident had caused a lot of noise and kept many girls from sleeping well. Nozomi, however, had no idea it happened because she went to bed early. He asked if Chisato had noticed anything, but Chisato said she had been busy all night taking care of Hazuki, who had gotten drunk. Mifuyu also slept so soundly that she did not notice anything. Michiru admitted she had not seen anything either. Izara mentioned that she thought the dorm security was strict, but clearly, something like this could still happen. Satsuki remarked that some foolish girl must have brought the intruder into the girls' camp. Hazuki, curious, wondered who that foolish girl could be, while Yuki pretended to know nothing. That night, Nozomi suggested a fun activity to lighten the mood. Since recreation was an important part of camping, she proposed a courage test. Satsuki agreed, saying her campaign work had been going well, so they could afford a little break. Nozomi proudly introduced her invention, a device she called Bakeru-kun. Yuki was puzzled by the strange name and could not figure out how she came up with it. When the courage test began, Yuki was paired with Chisato. As they walked together, they suddenly heard Hazuki and Isara scream. Yuki was about to rush to help them, but Chisato stopped him and asked if he was really that worried about Hazuki and Isara. Yuki explained that he was only concerned because they screamed, but Chisato seemed unconvinced. Soon after, Bakeru-kun rolled past them and transformed into a Japanese-style toilet. Yuki mentioned the old myth about a ghostly hand emerging from such toilets, but instead of a hand, a foot suddenly appeared from underneath it. Yuki was completely confused. Chisato crouched down to check under the toilet and asked Yuki to help her, leaving him unsure of what to do. Chisato then asked why Yuki seemed so worried about Hazuki and Izara earlier, but not about her. Yuki tried to explain that it was not like that. Looking a little hurt, Chisato brought up the night before, saying she knew the so-called intruder must have been Yuki. Cornered, Yuki admitted he had only been playing shogi. Chisato misunderstood and assumed he meant playing shogi with Hazuki, which confused Yuki until he realized she was talking about Hazuki instead of Satsuki. Chisato, still suspicious, suggested Yuki must have been with someone else too. Yuki explained that Hazuki had been drunk and unconscious, so he had simply carried her back to the dorm. As the two continued their awkward conversation, Bakeru-kun quietly rolled away. Yuki could not help wondering why Chisato had been acting strangely lately, especially since she had rested her head on his shoulder while they were soaking in the bath the day before. Yuki reassured Chisato that she did not need to act this way because he would never abandon her. He promised to stay by her side whenever she needed him. Chisato was touched by his words, but Yuki carefully clarified that this was not a confession of love. Chisato admitted she did not fully understand and looked sad. A moment later, Izara and Hazuki appeared. Before they could say anything, Chisato quietly walked away and Yuki immediately went after her. That night, Yuki felt relieved because he was finally able to take a peaceful bath. As he walked near the park, he noticed Hazuki sitting alone. Curious, Yuki approached her, but Hazuki immediately called him a creepy intruder. Yuki tried to explain that he had only been mistaken for someone suspicious and almost got caught because he had helped Hazuki earlier. Unexpectedly, Hazuki suddenly brought up Satsuki in a frustrated tone. Yuki asked why Hazuki seemed so upset with Satsuki, but Hazuki insisted that she didn't actually hate her. Yuki then carefully asked whether Hazuki disliked her own family and why she had left home. Hazuki guessed that Satsuki must have asked Yuki to bring up these questions and said that alcohol was the only thing she could truly trust. Hazuki sounded disappointed, thinking her younger sister might have sent Yuki to get her to talk. Yuki asked Hazuki to stop teasing him, but Hazuki claimed that she had confessed her real feelings to him before. Yuki quickly denied that anything like that had happened. Hazuki then asked how he would react if she confessed right there. Without hesitation, Hazuki expressed her love and demanded an answer. Yuki turned his face away, admitting that he loved Hazuki too. Hazuki seemed puzzled, wondering why Yuki kept avoiding her even though she was talking about romantic love and making a serious confession, not a joke. Yuki explained that he had held back his own feelings because he thought it was the mature thing to do. He also admitted he believed Hazuki had feelings for Chisato, but what really troubled him was the idea of dating Satsuki while still trying to understand Hazuki's emotions. Yuki said he needed more time to process everything before giving a proper answer. To Yuki's surprise, Hazuki suddenly called Satsuki and challenged her to a shogi match to decide who would win Yuki's heart. Hazuki promised that if Satsuki could defeat her, she would reveal the information Satsuki had been trying to learn. That same night, Hazuki and Satsuki sat down for a shogi battle with Yuki, caught awkwardly in the middle. Hazuki hadn't expected Satsuki to accept so quickly, but Satsuki saw it as a good chance to uncover the truth. Hazuki playfully teased Satsuki by asking if she secretly liked Yuki, which made Satsuki flustered and asked her to stop. Satsuki suspected Hazuki might be drunk, but Hazuki confidently claimed that she was sober enough to know what she was doing. Satsuki became irritated and threw one of the shogi pieces in frustration. Hazuki smirked and suggested that Satsuki should learn more about love, but Satsuki calmly replied that she simply wasn't reckless like Hazuki. Hazuki smiled again and teased Satsuki, saying she acted as if she were some kind of pure and untouchable girl. The conversation suddenly took a sharper turn when Hazuki mentioned Satsuki's mother. Hazuki said that Satsuki's mother had been their father's second wife. Satsuki demanded that Hazuki stop talking about her mother in that way, but Hazuki continued, explaining that Satsuki's mother had once been their father's companion before marrying him after Hazuki's own mother passed away. Hazuki pointed out that Satsuki was fortunate to have been born after the marriage because if she had been born earlier, people might have looked down on her for coming from an unrecognized relationship. Satsuki was clearly upset and told Hazuki to stop. Hazuki then suggested that Satsuki must be happy that she had left home, which pushed Satsuki to her limit. Satsuki slapped Hazuki, but Hazuki only smiled and asked whether Satsuki was giving up the game. Hazuki then boldly claimed Yuki as her prize, but Satsuki refused to quit. She continued the match and declared that if she won, Hazuki would have to go home and apologize to their mother. Despite Satsuki's determination, Hazuki skillfully pushed her into check several times. During a match, Hazuki reached for a drink but couldn't find any beer in Satsuki's room. Hazuki then began to share a story from when they were younger. When Satsuki was still a child, Hazuki once suffered a serious head injury that left a large scar. The wound bled so heavily that many adults worried she might need a blood transfusion. Hazuki explained that what made everyone even more anxious was her rare R-negative blood type. It turned out that Satsuki's mother also had the same R-negative blood type. At first, Satsuki didn't believe it, but Hazuki revealed that Satsuki's mother had actually given birth to her. This shocking truth meant that Hazuki and Satsuki were blood-related sisters, both born from the same mother. Satsuki mentioned that it might just be a coincidence, since a child with R-negative blood could still be born from two parents with R-positive blood. However, Hazuki had another piece of evidence. She explained that long before she was born, her mother had to have her uterus removed due to an illness. When Hazuki eventually learned about it, her father hesitated to tell her the full story. It turned out that after Hazuki's late mother could no longer have children, her father ended up having a relationship with Satsuki's mother. Many relatives pressured Hazuki's father to leave his wife, who could no longer conceive, so he could marry the other woman. But Hazuki's father refused to abandon his wife and instead decided to have a child with the second woman while still staying with his wife. That child was Hazuki. To keep it hidden from the relatives, Hazuki's father raised Hazuki as his legitimate daughter, and Hazuki believed that must have been a heavy burden for her late mother. All Hazuki could remember was how her late mother had always given her love and care. After Hazuki's mother passed away, the second woman entered their lives, and not long after that, Satsuki was born. When Hazuki first gained a cute little sister, she chose to get along with the new family. But later, after a relative accidentally revealed the truth while drunk, Hazuki no longer knew how to face her family. She panicked and struggled to figure out what to do, but her confusion eventually turned into anger. Unable to forgive her family, she decided to leave home. Hazuki felt deep sadness about this reality. To simply forget it would feel as though her late mother had never existed, and that was something she could never accept. Because of that, Hazuki decided that she only had one mother, the one who had already passed away. Satsuki cried after hearing the truth. She apologized to Hazuki and admitted she never realized how much Hazuki had endured. Hazuki held Satsuki's hand and told her that none of it was Satsuki's fault, since Satsuki had nothing to do with what happened. That night, Hazuki and Satsuki cried together and held each other tightly. Meanwhile, Yakumo received a report that Yuki had secretly met with Satsuki the previous night. One of Yakumo's subordinates suspected that Satsuki might try to use this against Yuki, but Yakumo was not convinced. If Satsuki were truly pursuing something like that, she would have already taken advantage of the incident with the troublesome person from the other day. Yakumo instructed his team to make sure the matter did not reach anyone else, especially their rivals. The Public Security Department was scheduled to return the following week once their suspension ended, and Yakumo told his subordinates to assign tasks and keep a close watch on the Katahira faction. One night, Shiseto dreamed of waking Daiki by giving him chocolate, but he never opened his eyes. She suddenly woke up startled and got ready for school. After preparing herself, she went to Yuki's room to wake him up. Shiseto reminded him to get ready because their campaign for the upcoming student council election was starting that day. Without realizing it, Shiseto accidentally mentioned Daiki's name instead of Yuki's. Meanwhile, the security department was holding a meeting led by Yakumo. The security department had long been the dominant party in school politics, but they were forced to step back from this year's election after an incident involving their leader, Uena. Yuki urged his team to start preparing early for next year's election. There were 3 candidates running for student council president that year: Satsuki from the finance department, Nohiji from the general affairs department, and Yuki himself as an independent candidate. Yuki explained that just like in previous years, the party in power would always have an advantage. If the departments were allowed to win this year, the security department's chances for next year would look bleak. However, if an independent candidate like Yuki, who had no hidden agenda, could become president, it would open a real opportunity for the security department to reclaim influence in the following election. Yakumo mentioned that one of their intelligence operators was secretly gathering information about Yuki, and Yuki reminded the team to keep this strictly confidential, especially from the Katahira faction. That morning, Yuki and Shiseto carried a huge stack of flyers around campus. Shiseto complained about how short-staffed their team was. As they headed down the stairs, a girl suddenly bumped into Yuki and fell. Yuki quickly apologized, and Shiseto worriedly asked if she was okay. The girl assured them she was fine, and Yuki helped her to her feet. Curious, the girl asked if Yuki was one of the candidates for student council president. Yuki introduced himself as an independent candidate who had passed the preliminary round. To his surprise, the girl admitted that she knew nothing about this year's election because she had been absent from school for a long time. She complimented Yuki on his name, and he handed her a flyer while politely asking for her support. Afterward, Yuki and Chisato continued handing out flyers. Chisato couldn't help but wonder why Yuki was acting so friendly with the girl they had just met. Not long after, Yuki noticed Satsuki and Hazuki arguing. The two were debating their recent shogi match. Hazuki suggested that Satsuki should have analyzed her opponent's moves more carefully. After Hazuki left, Satsuki greeted Yuki, who had been quietly listening. Yuki asked what was going on, thinking that Satsuki and Hazuki had already made up. Satsuki explained that Hazuki had tricked her, insisting that she should have been the winner of their game. Hazuki had apparently distracted her with a story from the past, which threw her off. Yuki reassured Satsuki that the outcome wasn't a big deal, pointing out that Satsuki probably wanted to hear Hazuki's story anyway. Satsuki, however, stressed that the situation mattered because Yuki had been the prize for the winner of their shogi match. Embarrassed, Satsuki quickly asked Yuki to forget she said anything. At that moment, Chisato appeared and questioned what they were talking about. Yuki froze, unable to explain in front of her. He introduced Chisato as the head of his campaign team. Satsuki clarified that there was no secret deal or hidden arrangement between her and Yuki regarding the election, assuring Chisato that it was nothing to worry about. She mentioned that they were simply discussing a personal matter. Chisato was caught off guard by that statement, and Yuki quickly asked Satsuki not to describe it that way. Afterward, Chisato seemed upset with Yuki, though she denied it when he asked. Yuki tried to clarify that he hadn't been discussing anything election-related with Satsuki, but Chisato's frustration came from Yuki being too close to her rival. The two eventually regrouped with their team to continue distributing flyers. Ai and Ki scolded them for arriving late, and Chisato apologized, explaining that something unexpected had delayed them. Just then, Hazuki appeared and thanked Yuki for helping her resolve her disagreement with Satsuki. Yuki insisted that he hadn't done anything, but Hazuki smiled and said it was thanks to him anyway. Chisato quietly grew annoyed at how comfortable Hazuki seemed around Yuki. Later, Nozomi proudly showed off a device she had invented that could transform into a winner's stage. Mifuyu was thrilled by the creation, while Oboro noted that it matched Yakumomo's prediction that students would naturally be drawn to the setup as they arrived at school. Mifuyu revealed that she had secured the location for their campaign event. During all this excitement, Chisato became distracted as she watched a pair of siblings playing together nearby, which reminded her of Daiki. Yuki thanked Mifuyu for her hard work, and the team began rehearsing their skit, although Chisato chose not to participate and instead urged everyone to focus on their campaign duties. Not long after, Higaka arrived with a message from the ASP stating that she had been assigned to report to Yuki throughout the election period. Yuki happily welcomed her as a collaborator. The flyer distribution team was divided into groups, with Oboro, Isara, and Michiru handling the handouts, while Ai and Ki were assigned by Nozomi to generate power for the winner's stage. Once everyone was in position, the campaign kicked off. Ai and Ki pitted to supply electricity to the stage. Yuki delivered an energetic speech to the gathered students, and the rest of the team worked hard to distribute flyers to the crowd. At the same time, Satsuki gave her own public speech elsewhere on campus. Meanwhile, the General Affairs Department gathered in their room, excited about their strong chance to win this year, especially since the Security Department had been excluded from the election and they had gained a powerful ally. During his speech, Yuki spoke about his plan to stop the club reform policy. Chisato, Oboro, and Mifuyu encouraged the students to support an independent candidate who aimed to improve the academy. Michiru worked hard to hand out flyers, and Izara joined her in distributing brochures. However, a group of female students who often bullied Izara suddenly appeared, forcefully taking the flyers away. They claimed that scholarship students had no right to participate in the election. Izara calmly asked them to return the flyers. Yuki noticed what was happening, stopped his speech, and quickly went to help Izara. He firmly called out the girls, but they were surprised that Yuki would defend a scholarship student. Yuki felt angry, but Chisato stopped him and reminded him not to resort to violence, especially because he was in the middle of the campaign. Although Yuki was frustrated, Chisato pleaded with him to keep his temper. A short while later, two members of the security department arrived and asked the bullying girls to show their student ID cards. The girls tried to insist they had done nothing wrong, but the security department members had witnessed everything. Eventually, the girls handed over their IDs. The officers reminded them that they had violated student rule number 7 regarding respectful relationships with others, which required students to treat everyone with respect regardless of age, gender, or status. They also pointed out that the girls had broken the rule against harassment, even though the girls argued that they had not used physical violence. The officers clarified that verbal harassment counted as a form of violence. The case would be handled further by the security department. Shortly after, Hazuki arrived and asked what was going on. Chisato assured her that everything was under control and that the situation had been resolved. Izara expressed her gratitude to Yuki and the others. She admitted that she often experienced mistreatment from her classmates and had grown used to it, but she was actually more frightened of the security department members. Izara shared that one day, a scholarship student in her class had been called in by the security department and ended up so traumatized that she stopped coming to school entirely. Hazuki asked if that girl's case was related to the Yuina incident. Later, Yuki and his friends gathered in the food research club room, where Higaka explained the details of the Yuina incident. It began when an anonymous source reported to the security department that a scholarship student had stolen from the school's co-op store. Yuina, who was the head of the security department at the time, overstepped her authority during the investigation and even revealed the suspect's name despite a lack of solid evidence. Hazuki added that as a result, harassment toward the accused student increased, and eventually the student could no longer handle the pressure and dropped out of school. Hidaka revealed that the accusation was eventually proven to be false and Yuina was suspended for her mishandling of the case. Later on, Yakumo returned as the head of the security department while also serving as the student council president. According to Hazuki, the situation became somewhat calmer after Yakumo's return, but the security department never fully addressed the deeper issues. Izara once again thanked Yuki for helping her. Yuki said he was glad his actions made a difference for her. Hidaka playfully commented that Yuki looked really cool, though unfortunately, she had not managed to take a photo of him. Oboro pointed out that the scholarship system was supposed to support students both academically and financially. Hidaka explained that the policy was adopted to increase student enrollment without lowering the school's academic standards. The system allowed scholarship students to work for partner companies, and their earnings would help fund their education. Scholarship students, however, were prohibited from having part-time jobs so they could focus on the school-assigned work, and they were also not allowed to join clubs. Hazuki praised the scholarship students for their hard work and dedication. Nozomi stated that scholarship students should never face harassment and should take pride in their efforts. Yuki added that he wanted to include a new statement in his financial report. His goal was to end all forms of discrimination against scholarship students at Takafuji Academy. That day, Yuina came to the security department room and was warmly welcomed by its members. She felt like an executive who had just returned from a long absence. Yuina asked if Yakumo was doing all right, believing that he must have been under pressure for handling 2 roles while she was away. Yakumo brushed it off, explaining that the vice chair had managed everything. Yuina teased that it was probably easier to deal with all of that than to deal with her, especially since he seemed to sympathize with the Katahira faction. Yuina was eager to hear Yakumo's thoughts about the candidate Yuki. Meanwhile, Yuki and Chisato were visiting various clubs to ask for their support. They had just left the Dog Pot Club when Yuki wondered how that club was still surviving budget cuts, while the Food Research Club was on the verge of being shut down. Chisato questioned Yuki about adding the scholarship student issue into his campaign report, even though their original goal was simply to save the Food Research Club. She wondered why he suddenly included a policy like that. In her opinion, Yuki only needed to win the election and should focus on creating a report that would attract as many students as possible to their side. Yuki, however, was surprised because Chisato had also witnessed how many scholarship students were treated unfairly. Chisato argued that the majority of students looked down on scholarship recipients and that they were only a small minority. Yuki insisted he couldn't ignore the issue, though Chisato felt he should deal with it after winning the student council election. What mattered most for now was victory. Yuki disagreed, saying that the issue needed to be brought to everyone's attention as soon as possible. Chisato wondered if Yuki's determination came from a sense of justice, because of Izara, who was a scholarship student, a desire to impress Hazuki, a wish to be praised by the ASP reporter, or even a rivalry with Satsuki. Yuki was confused as to why she would think that way. Chisato admitted she simply didn't want Yuki to leave her behind. With tears in her eyes, she asked why he was drifting away. Yuki reassured her that he was right there with her, promising that he would always stay by her side and never go anywhere. Later that afternoon, Yuina and Yakumo discussed Yuki. Yuina praised Yuki's strong approval ratings and asked whether he would side with them. More specifically, if he could be swayed to act as a figurehead for the security department. Yakumo replied that he and Yuki were only cooperating to help Yuki get elected. Yuina suspected that Yuki might eventually propose policies that could harm the security department and warned Yakumo to be careful about who he was working with, using the proverb that someone trusted could still betray you when you least expect it. After that, Yuina said her goodbyes. That same afternoon, A and Ki were exhausted after working all day. Hidaka mentioned that Yuki's approval rating was the highest among all candidates, which left them surprised by the news. Later, Yuki walked home with Chisato and Mifyu. Chisato was puzzled that most of Yuki's supporters were female. Mifyu casually said it was because Yuki was charming. Suddenly, a car from the recycling club sped recklessly past them. They then approached Michiru, who was sitting alone. Yuki asked why she wasn't playing her harmonica. Michiru said it seemed to be broken. Yuki took the harmonica and tried blowing into it to test it. Shiseido and Mifyu were startled, realizing it meant an indirect kiss. Yuki quickly apologized to Michiru, but she said she didn't mind as long as it was from him. Shiseido grew frustrated when she noticed Yuki blushing in embarrassment. Yuki then ran ahead, and without realizing it, a car suddenly sped toward him. Shiseido was struck with fear, instantly remembering the tragic accident involving Daiki, and screamed in panic. When Yuki was a little boy, he often refused to go to school even though his mother had to leave for work. No matter how much she tried, Yuki still wouldn't budge. One day, Shiseido showed up with a piece of chocolate and told him to eat it. Yuki took a bite, which instantly made Shiseido happy. From that day on, Shiseido kept giving Yuki chocolate whenever they played together, whether it was at the park or in his room. But one day, Yuki suddenly refused the chocolate. He said he didn't want to eat it anymore. That simple moment triggered a painful memory for Chisato, reminding her of the time Daiki refused to eat chocolate with her before a tragic accident. Overwhelmed with emotion, Chisato began to cry, apologizing and pleading for Daiki not to disappear from her heart. Seeing her like that, Yuki picked up the chocolate and ate it after all. He promised Chisato that he would never disappear, that he wouldn't go anywhere, and that he would always stay by her side no matter what happened. Not long after, Yuki was rushed to the hospital after being hit by a car. Shiseido cried nonstop while Mifyu tried to comfort her. Later, Yuki came to see his friends and told them that the doctor said he was okay, but he would need to come back the next day for a follow-up check just to be safe. Mifyu felt relieved that he didn't suffer any serious injuries. While they were at the hospital lobby, Yuki unexpectedly saw Yakumo carrying a bouquet of flowers. Shiseido immediately held on to Yuki's arm, still worried about him. Meanwhile, Satsuki went to the club room and asked if it was true that Yuki had been in an accident. Hazuki explained that Yuki had been hit by a delivery truck after suddenly jumping into the street, which startled the driver and made it hard to brake in time. Satsuki panicked and asked how Yuki was doing. Nozomi reassured her that Yuki was fine and completely unharmed. Hearing that, Satsuki let out a sigh of relief and hugged Hazuki. Ari and Ki jokingly called Yuki a troublemaker and said they actually felt bad for the truck driver. Izara and Oboro were simply grateful that Yuki was safe. Hazuki reminded everyone that Yuki needed to be more careful, especially with the student elections still going on. Satsuki called Yuki careless for making everyone worry and teased that maybe foolish Yuki suited him better. Just then, Yuki walked in, surprising Satsuki. Hazuki asked if he was really okay, but it seemed like Shiseido was the one who wasn't fine. She kept clinging to Yuki, even when they were already in front of his house. Shiseido refused to let go of his hand even though Yuki wanted to go inside, change clothes, and rest. When Yuki finally tried to change, he accidentally knocked down Mikiru's harmonica, which had Kana's name engraved on it. Shiseido still wouldn't let go of him, not even when Yuki wanted to eat, use the restroom, or take a shower. Yuki apologized, saying he hadn't meant for the earlier accident to happen and promised to be more careful from now on. He understood that Shiseido had been badly shaken, but he gently asked her to understand and give him some space. Even so, Shiseido still didn't let go. Yuki finally tore his shirt so he could take a shower. Shiseido stayed right outside the bathroom door, making Yuki more frustrated. He hit the bathroom mirror in frustration, admitting he didn't know what to do anymore. Shiseido called him a liar, reminding him of his promise not to leave her. Yuki tried to explain that he hadn't gone anywhere and was still there with her, but Shiseido kept insisting he was breaking his promise. Unable to hold back his frustration, Yuki raised his voice and told her to stop. Startled, Shiseido left the bathroom and took a piece of chocolate from her bag. She offered it to Yuki, asking him to eat it, to say it tasted good, and to forgive her. She begged him to stay by her side and never leave. Yuki looked at her and asked what he really meant to her. He questioned whether he had only been a replacement for Daiki all this time. Shiseido denied it, but Yuki didn't believe her. He felt that she wasn't truly seeing him, she was only seeing Daiki through him, and because of that, what they had couldn't be called love. Shiseido was shocked by his words. Yuki felt that she was drifting further and further away from him. He told her he wouldn't eat the chocolate anymore and said that if anyone should eat it, it should be her. He didn't want to be Daiki's substitute anymore. Shiseido asked why he refused when he had promised to stay with her. Yuki answered that he was indeed with her, but he didn't want to be treated as someone else. He asked her to see him as Yuki, just Yuki, because he wanted her to be with him for who he truly was. Shiseido bit into the chocolate, trying to eat it, but she couldn't bring herself to swallow it. Tears streamed down her face once again. That night, Yuki lay awake, unsure of what to do next, while Shiseido also stayed awake, quietly crying as memories of Daiki continued to haunt her. The next day, Yuki delivered a speech in front of the students while his team worked hard on campaign tasks. Everyone joined forces to support Yuki in the election, but Chisato remained quietly in her room, still looking sad. After a full day of campaigning, Yuki returned to the club room and was surprised to find Mikuru searching for something under a table. Yuki quickly looked away because he did not want to accidentally stare at Mikuru's underwear, which was slightly visible. He then asked where the other team members were. Mikuru explained that no one else had arrived at the club room yet. Yuka checked the latest approval rankings and was pleasantly surprised to see that he was now ahead of the other candidates. A smile crossed his face as he looked at the results. Mikuru studied Yuki's expression and remarked that the colors she sensed around his body seemed to show a hint of unease. She wondered if it was because Chisato had not come to school. Yuki admitted that Mikuru's guess was partly true. His feelings were mixed. Some of it was because of Chisato, and some was due to personal matters. Yuki asked Mikuru not to worry about it and handed her the harmonica he had accidentally carried in his pocket. He told her that he had repaired the harmonica, which made Mikuru curious about how he managed to fix it. Yuki explained that he learned the method from the internet. Delighted, Mikuru immediately tried playing it and felt happy to hear the improved sound. She played a beautiful melody and Yuki asked what song it was. Mikuru admitted that she did not know. She was simply playing what she had practiced. Yuki noticed a name engraved on the back of the harmonica and asked if someone named Kana had taught her. Mikuru revealed that the harmonica had originally belonged to Kana and was given to her as a gift. Yuki commented that Mikuru and Kana must have been close friends. Mikuru smiled softly and confirmed that Kana had been her best friend, but she had suddenly lost contact with her. Mikuru explained that she had come to Takafuji High School hoping to find Kana, but had not succeeded yet. She began to play the harmonica again, as if recalling her memories with Kana. Meanwhile, Kana was lying alone in a hospital room. At the same moment, Yakumo rushed into the club room, calling out Kana's name by accident as he stumbled through the doorway. Startled, Yuki and Mikuru looked at him in surprise. Yakumo quickly apologized, explaining that he had tripped at the entrance. He then asked about Chisato, saying he had been unable to reach her. Yuki told him that Chisato was feeling unwell and needed to rest. Yakumo mentioned that Chisato had asked him for advice the day before and that he had wanted to discuss it further. Curious, Yuki asked what kind of advice they were talking about. Yakumo then questioned Yuki about his plan to address discrimination against scholarship students in his campaign report. Yuki admitted that he was still working on the policy and was unsure of the best approach. Yakumo firmly advised Yuki to drop the idea and warned him not to bring up anything related to scholarship students during the election. Yuki pointed out that some students were experiencing bullying, but Yakumo's tone turned serious as he stated that this was no longer a request but an order. Yakumo reminded Yuki that their group was supporting his candidacy to ensure his victory, not to push personal opinions that might jeopardize the election. In Yakumo's view, sensitive issues like that could be addressed after Yuki was elected, but if he lost now, nothing could be done. Yakumo explained that noble calls for change would remain empty unless Yuki first gained the platform and resources needed to turn ideals into reality. He emphasized that Yuki should understand the importance of strategy in making his vision achievable. That day, Yumina called Katahira, feeling confused about why Yakumo was still working with Yuki. She thought it was a waste of time since she had already made her own plans. Yumina promised to protect Takafuji's traditions, and she also had a request for Katahira. On the same day, Yuki went to the hospital for a follow-up checkup. While handling the paperwork at the administration desk, he noticed Kimika, who was also there for treatment because of a problem with her contact lenses. Kimika asked why Yuki was visiting the hospital, and he explained that he was only getting a checkup after his recent accident. Kimika looked concerned and then accidentally dropped one of her contact lenses. As Yuki helped her search for it, he suddenly spotted Yakumo passing by. Curious, Yuki quickly followed him. Yakumo seemed irritated while talking on the phone with someone, which made Yuki wonder who was on the other end of the call. From what Yuki overheard, it sounded like there was a disagreement. Yakumo mentioned that it was Yuina's fault that the security department had to withdraw from the election. He also brought up Kana's name and pleaded for someone not to abandon her. Yuki suddenly realized that the Kana Yakumo mentioned might be the same Kana, who was Michiru's missing friend. After finishing the call, Yakumo entered an elevator, and Yuki decided to secretly follow him up to the 12th floor. When he reached the 13th floor, Yuki wandered around searching for a room but ended up at a dead end. By chance, he noticed a door with Kana's name on it. He cautiously opened it and stepped inside, only to find Kimika lying on a patient bed. Shocked, Yuki then noticed a girl quietly sitting with her eyes open. He wondered if this girl was the Kana everyone had been talking about. Before Yuki could process what was happening, Yakumo appeared and asked why he had entered Kana's room. Yuki, didn't even have the chance to respond before Yakumo's subordinates restrained him. When Yuki regained consciousness sometime later, he discovered that his hands were handcuffed. Yakumo questioned him but calmly offered to remove the cuffs if Yuki promised not to resist. Yuki agreed, and Yakumo's subordinates unlocked the restraints. Yakumo asked how much Yuki knew about Kana and insisted that Yuki answer honestly. He explained that he didn't want any violence because he preferred to maintain a good relationship with Yuki. Yakumo introduced himself as the former head of the security department. Although he admitted he couldn't do much against Yuina's plans, he warned that he was still capable of taking serious action when necessary. Yuki explained that all he knew was that Kana owned the harmonica Mikuru often carried and that he had heard about Yakumo's deal to help Kana recover, which somehow involved Yuina. Yakumo admitted that he had made a serious mistake during his time as head of security, unaware that someone else had been secretly listening behind his back. Curious and concerned, Yuki asked what had actually happened to Kana and what Yakumo had done. Yakumo said that if Yuki truly wanted to know, he would tell him everything, but warned him never to return after hearing the truth. Yakumo then revealed that the security department was responsible for keeping the school safe, but since it was impossible to monitor every corner of such a large campus, they had resorted to questionable methods. They used EST agents, essentially undercover students who blended in like normal classmates while secretly observing others and reporting information back to the department. This system allowed the department to handle potential problems before they escalated. After completing orientation and training, each S agent was assigned to a handler, someone who directed their missions and took responsibility for them. Kana was one of these agents and Yakumo had been her handler. Surprisingly, Mikuru had also been an agent under his supervision. Yuki was stunned to learn this, realizing that Michiru's habit of searching under desks and furniture was not random. She had actually been planting listening devices. Yakumo added that Yuki couldn't simply walk away after learning such confidential information. Meanwhile, Mikuru sat elsewhere playing the harmonica that Kana had given her, clearly missing her dear friend. Yuki had just found out that Kana and Mikuru were actually acting as spies. Yakumo explained that they were intentionally using spies to keep the school environment safe. Every year, the amount of money flowing through the school reached billions of yen, while the student body held a significant level of autonomy in their decision-making. Behind the scenes, however, there was a quiet struggle for power, and Kana ended up caught in part of that conspiracy. Last December, Kana was involved in an accident. Yakumo believed that she was targeted while investigating something important. The memory card inside Kana's camera was thought to contain evidence of the conspiracy, but it was stolen and destroyed. Since then, Kana had remained in a coma. The news of the accident was kept secret to protect the identity of Agent S. Kana was receiving intensive care at a hospital managed by a former member of the security department. That hospital was known for handling sensitive cases like Kana's, so everything had gone smoothly so far. However, Yakumo and the others were facing another serious problem. Meanwhile, Yuina was on the phone with someone informing them that Yakumo was determined to place Yuki on the throne as the next student council president. Yuina asked the person on the other end of the line to help her prevent Yuki from becoming president. That same day, Mifuyu visited Chisato in her room and was surprised to find her looking downhearted. When Mifuyu asked what was wrong, Chisato claimed that nothing was bothering her. Chisato even said she did not care about the upcoming election at all. Mifuyu reminded her that if they failed, the Food Research Club would be disbanded. Chisato admitted that she no longer cared about the club either, leaving Mifuyu shocked by how much her attitude had changed. At the same time, Yakumo revealed that the hospital where Kana was being treated was affiliated with the Katahira faction, which was Yakumo's internal rival within the department. One of the conditions for admitting Kana to that hospital was to appoint Yuina as the head of public security. Yuki was stunned to hear how far they were willing to go just to decide who would hold such an important position. Yakumo then asked whether Yuki thought it would be better to let Kana die. Yuki quickly denied ever meaning something like that. Yakumo expressed confidence that Yuki could handle this situation, comparing it to the way he firmly refused to eat chocolate in the past. Yuki was startled that Yakumo even knew about that. Yakumo explained that ever since Chisato's younger brother passed away, she had been depending on Yuki for lifelong support, but in Yakumo's view, Yuki had been pushing her away. Yuki could not understand how Yakumo had come to that conclusion. Yakumo reminded him that he once swore to become Daiki's replacement forever. Yakumo knew that Yuki secretly believed Chisato would one day accept Daiki's death, and when that happened, Yuki would no longer have a reason to stay by her side. Yakumo also pointed out that Yuki was using Daiki's memory as an excuse to hide from his own feelings. Even when Yuki tried to fall in love with another girl, Chisato always remained on his mind. Yakumo accused Yuki of being unable to commit to anyone, which naturally upset Yuki. Yakumo added that compared to the complicated emotions Yuki was dealing with, Yakumo's own situation felt more straightforward, since he was about to lose someone important to him. Meanwhile, Mifyu gently approached Chisato again. She suspected that Chisato had argued with Yuki and invited her to talk things over with him, but Chisato refused. Mifyu urged her to discuss the problem before things got worse, but Chisato insisted on being left alone. While helping Chisato gather a change of clothes from her closet, Mifyu was surprised to find a large number of chocolate pieces that had been partially cut. Mifyu asked where the missing pieces had gone and wondered if, all this time, Chisato had been treating Yuki as a replacement for her late brother. Chisato firmly denied it. Mifyu then asked whether Chisato truly loved Yuki and whether she should see him for who he really was instead of as a substitute for Daiki. Chisato asked Mifyu to leave her alone again, questioning why Mifyu was not more worried about her own feelings since Mifyu clearly loved Yuki as well. Chisato guessed that Mifyu was either holding herself back or concerned about the scar from her surgery. Chisato assured her that Yuki would not care about something like that and encouraged Mifyu not to keep suppressing her own feelings. Shigen wondered why Mifyu had not asked Yuki out yet, believing that Yuki probably liked her too. Mifyu hugged Chisato tightly and begged her not to say things like that again. Elsewhere, Yakumo warned that their political party would soon lose power and that the new ruling party would begin auditing the security department's expenses. Once that happened, it would become obvious that the department's funds were being used for Kana's medical care, and when that truth came to light, Yakumo would no longer be able to continue Kana's treatment. As the gatekeeper of the security department, Yakumo finally crossed paths with Yuki. If Yuki could win the election and become student council president, he would have the influence needed to keep Kana's treatment going. Yakumo admitted that Yuki had surpassed his expectations, but at that moment Yuki found himself caught in the fierce competition for first place in the presidential race. Yakumo explained that the situation had changed because the head of the Katahira faction decided to stop all support for Yuki, which also meant stopping Kana's medical treatment. At that moment, Mifyu was still holding Chisato tightly. Chisato said she wanted forgiveness because Daiki had passed away without being able to eat his favorite chocolate, something she had denied him that day. Daiki was gone and could no longer forgive her, but Chisato shared that simply remembering him eating chocolate had somehow saved her spirit. Chisato admitted that she loved Yuki deeply and felt happiness in her heart, that she could not allow herself to truly be happy because Daiki would never have that chance again. Tears began to flow uncontrollably. Mifyu, wanting to comfort her, quietly changed into a lighter outfit that revealed the scars from her surgery before leaving the room. Chisato, realizing what was happening, rushed after her. Mifyu thought to herself that she could not remain bound to the past and needed to move forward. As soon as the elevator doors opened, Chisato caught up with her and hugged her tightly, apologizing and asking her to stop.